My guest today is the new head of international growth for Mozaik. After successfully launching and building up Cadmate for the last 5 years, supporting Mozaik in the Australian and New Zealand markets. His efforts to grow and support the Mozaik user base in those markets is nothing short of remarkable. Embracing social media, library and product development, and building out a team of others who can offer incredible support. What he's done for that user base should be a case study in how to do software right. He absolutely nailed it. Now, his company's been acquired by Cyncly, who also acquired Mozaik, and he's turned his sights on growing Mozaik in new markets. Had an absolutely fascinating conversation with my friend, Mr. David Carr.
Wore my Packers jersey, man. I was
if you would have worn the Packers jersey, oh man.
I was pretty tempted, but I was like, I actually tried to pick one up in Vegas last week, but the store's closed now, so I wanted to get the white love jersey. So yeah.
How did you become a Packer fan? What's the story behind that?
Madden. I started playing Madden back in 1995. Madden 95, picked up a PlayStation, and it was like, all right, the first thing you got to pick a team. Scrolling through, and it's like, green and gold. It's the Aussie colours. So, that's the Australian, like when Australia competes at the Olympics, it's green and gold. I saw that with the Packers. I was like, all right, sweet. I'll go with them.
Yep. And I'm sure Brett Favre was one of the best players in that game at that point.
Yeah, that's right. I started watching it after that. And, that happened to be pretty good time when Packers were actually doing pretty well as well. So
yeah,
I think that really snowballed my,
Well, you've had almost 2 or 3 decades of success now, which I hate as a Vikings fan, but it's the truth.
There's plenty of pain in that too, there's plenty. Yeah.
Oh yeah. When you see the inside scoop on stuff like that, it's very eye opening, right? Because when you watch on TV, you don't get all of that emotion and the inside scoop, and
it's pretty cool too. I think Lions were, you watch that and you really realize how much Lions were just so unlucky last year. They had the best team by a long way, and
I agree.
Their defense fell apart with injuries, and they were the really hard luck story of the season. But and we've got them in the opening round this year, so that'll be interesting.
It's going to be interesting to see. Yeah. Thanks for being here, man. We just talked last week at AWFS off and on, and I'm glad we could get this scheduled. I got to say, usually we start with the origin story, and we'll do that, but I'm going to start with my intro to you. I was this would have been probably 2020, I'm guessing. I randomly found a YouTube video of a wine rack with half lap joints from some company called Cadmate. Who knows where? No idea, right? And I'm watching this thing happen, and all these user parameters, and I thought I was doing some pretty cool stuff in Mozaik, and we were for the most part, but nothing quite to that level, no product quite designed to that level. And it was so eye-opening to me, and so I owe you for really kicking off what I then went on to do and become, and seeing where you could take it. So I got to say thanks for content like that, and that was huge. Really cool, so tell me, so most people will know you from your work with Cadmate, your former company, which we'll get into how that played out later. But tell me how you got into the cabinet software game in the first place.
So I started my apprenticeship as a cabinet maker back in 2001 at a commercial joinery company in Sydney called Rondon Joinery. In hindsight, I'd walked into a company that, was a decent sized company, probably between 40 and 50 employees. They, as a first year apprentice, you get all the pretty average jobs there, right? I mean, I'm tailing out on an edge bander. I'm,
average might be a nice way to put that. I'm
nice way to put it. Yeah. I'm at the end of an edge bander. I'm under the beam saw, sweeping out 6-month-old MDF dust. You don't really learn much, right? You're just kind of there as someone to help, and you're kind of expected to go to trade school and learn. I think the most fortunate thing that happened to me was at the end of that year, that company had a massive downsize. So they, let go 80% of their employees. And
wow.
I was one of the people that got cut, basically last in, first out sort of situation, right? And, going home and explaining to my parents, I was living at home at the time, hey, I lost my job today, it's a pretty impactful moment in your life. You kind of feel you've let people down.
Mm-hmm.
and kind of like, okay, where to from here? Do I stay in the industry? What do I do? And I know my mum gave me the advice of like, look for a smaller company where you can be more impactful within that organization. Look for a company where you're going to be exposed to more things and learn more. You're not just going to be kind of like a cog in the machine, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And so I found a company that was called Hammercraft, that was just a really small. I mean, they had the owner of the business, his wife, and a third-year apprentice and an installer, and that was it. Like, it was 4 people. I was joining as the fifth person, as pretty much at a second-year apprentice at the time, right? So we I walked in, and I'm at that point, it was like, okay, here's your cutting list. There's the table saw. Off you go. And I'm like, I've never used a saw before, man. He's like, what do
Yep.
you mean you're a second year? Like, what'd you do in your first year? I'm like,
Yeah.
man,
Swept
I
the
was just
floor.
sweeping up dust, like,
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, I need you to book match this like veneer, all this veneer. And I'm like, oh, damn, I'm not touching that. This is like, okay, learn fast. And like I said, my mum had some great advice for me, and it was like, be helpful. Always make sure you add in value, whatever you do. And, I had to learn really fast at that company, and to keep up and stay there, because I had a year of catching up to do, right? And,
Mm-hmm.
the person that was a year ahead of me in his apprenticeship, like, he was honestly 5 years ahead of me in knowledge and skill, and I sort of looked up to him, and he was great. He took me under his wing and really sort of showed me the ropes, and I learned a lot about cabinet making from that company, because they were doing some pretty cool stuff for really high-end residential joinery.
Mm-hmm.
So we would get a house in a really expensive suburb in Sydney, and we'd make like everything from beds to bedside tables to kitchens to
I see.
closets, wardrobes, like the entire thing. You just wouldn't be one piece of joinery in the house that you wouldn't be making. So I
Yeah.
feel like I was fortunate enough to get exposed to a lot. And at that same place, they had an old Biesi 323, a DOS version of a Biesi, right? So,
Yep. Old
and they
school.
weren't really using it, to be fair. Like, it was kind of just sitting there, and it was like, all right, well, if you want to wrap your head around it, go for it. And I got really interested, and learned to program that thing. Would do basic things like just cut a little data or a groove. Type in XYZ coordinates, tell it to pick up a
Mm-hmm.
tool, like all manual program, keystrokes at the machine. And I really got super interested in that from there. So kind of sparked my appetite for, like, what machinery and automation in the industry could do, like, and how it would be so different to all the manual methods that I was kind of already learning.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, I left that company when I finished my apprenticeship. I wanted to kind of, continue to grow, and I felt like I needed to, see more in the industry. It was also about an hour away from home, so I was kind of looking for something a bit closer to home as well. And I picked up a job at a commercial company, kind of like fitting out supermarkets. So they would make like reception count, no, like checkout counters for, where you'd take your groceries and you'd go through a checkout. They'd make like fruit bins and all sorts of random kind of stuff that was very different to the residential side that I was in. And it blew my mind that they didn't have like any machinery, right? So I'm like, I come from a company that had CNC machinery at the time. It was a point to point, I should say, as well. That
Yep.
323, right?
Yeah.
So we're not at the flatbed sort of nested router stage yet. I went to this company. They didn't even have templates. I mean, they were like, they were marking these things out up by hand and like jigsawing and then belt sanding. And I'm like, wow, man. The first thing I did was like,
And
let's
what
let's
year?
make.
What year was this roughly
This
when you
was
went to
around
this third?
2005, around
Okay.
2005. Yeah.
Yeah.
So about 20 years ago.
Yep.
And, my recommendation to that company was like, you guys need to get a CNC machine. Like, this is crazy. Like, everything you do is template. Like, it can be a
Yep.
template. You can rinse and repeat this. It could be so much quicker.
Did they
Um,
listen?
no, the owner was kind of an older guy. He was pretty afraid of the idea. It was still early into the piece where, that kind of maybe sounded a bit like witchcraft to a lot of people, it
Mm-hmm.
was sort of. But I said, at least let me make some templates. So I made a bunch of templates out of MDF. So at least we could put like use a hand router with a copy wheel to actually copy the things and not have to, draw these things and belt sand them every time. So,
Yep.
you know, I think that opened his eyes a bit, but I was super interested in like where the industry was going. So I went to what we call it a TAFE in Australia. It's kind of like a trade school, but you can go and like do short course degrees in different things. So I went and did a short course in AutoCAD. I was like, thought I'd be interesting to learn AutoCAD and see kind of where that could take me. And so I studied AutoCAD for, I don't know, I think the course was around about a year. I was kind of only a few months into it and noticed a job opportunity came up for an American software company called Microvellum that was starting up in Australia. So
Wow.
they were launching in Australia, and they did it through a customer that they had here um, called TrevMeg. And so basically, these guys, Trevor and Megan, ran a joinery company, and they were using Microvellum, and they'd sort of reached out to Trevor and said, "Hey, would you be interested in being the reseller there and taking this up?" And Trevor put the advert out to hire people, and I walked in for an interview, and another colleague that would then turn into be like a business partner down the line and a long-term friend walked in for an interview on the same day, and he was like, "Oh, I want to hire both of you." He actually called me, and he's like, "Man, I want to hire both of you." But he's like, "Unbelievable. This guy that came in straight after you was like, he spent 5 years drafting on cabinet vision, so he's got like so much more experience." He's like, "If you give me a couple of months, there'll be a job there for you as well." So kept doing my AutoCAD thing, and then sure enough, a couple of months later, I was the second person to join that company.
Wow.
And the first person was a gentleman called Jamie, and he would be my business partner in a future venture. So we kind of were basically the first people in Australia teaching, supporting, selling Microvellum. Like we were wearing all the hats. We're learning it ourselves on the fly, building libraries for the market. It was kind of like, really a startup business, and we're sort of blazing trails in that sense and competing against Cabinet Vision, I guess, as the leading option for software at the time.
Yep. So
that
prior
was
to that, was it pretty much Cabinet Vision or bust in Australia at the time?
Yeah. So like kind of probably like America, like Cabinetware and Cabinet Vision. And then, later on when they kind of all, the end of life for Cabinetware, it was really Cabinet Vision or bust, really. Like they definitely had a monopoly on the market, and there was really not much else that was competing with them. One that I'd later get involved with, Cabmaster, was at the time called Cuisine in Australia, and that was probably the only other product that sort of was competing, really. But it definitely had the lion's share of the market, and really, that was reflected in a lot of things, like the way it was serviced and the way prices would increase and that kind of thing.
Sure.
Yeah.
Interesting. So how long were you on the Microvellum team then?
Just under 2 years. So I think it was around late 2006, early 2007. I was approached by so there was a guy that came and worked with us at Microvellum for a little while, and he ended up going over to Cabinet Vision, and he was trying to recruit me basically. Then he was like, "Look, you should come over here. There's great opportunities. This company is like just, growing in leaps and bounds. Like, you'd be really valuable here." And I sort of toyed with the idea for a while. I enjoyed Microvellum. Like it was a difficult program to teach though, right? I enjoyed the flexibility and just how much you could do whatever you wanted in that thing, but also the complexity of like I was going from shop to shop in Australia, like on site teaching this thing, and I could see just how complicated it was, like it's like it was difficult to make it easy. And for the right shop, it was definitely the right fit, but more geared towards that kind of commercial shop fitting market. Like, if you're doing that kind of thing where you're building weird and wonderful kind of reception counters and, compound shaped items, like that was perfect. But then when people were trying to implement it for like their bread and butter cabinets, it was just like, it didn't have to be that hard, so it was kind of interesting. And there was some changes going around in internally within the company in Australia. There was some, I guess we'll just say, like some not too above board things happening, and I was being asked to sort of install, let's just say, not really legitimate copies of AutoCAD, and that didn't sit well with me. My moral compass was sort of spinning and going, hey, you need to
alert, going off. Yeah.
So I left then and joined Planet in Australia, the reseller of Cabinet Vision over here, and I started as a trainer, basically going from place to place, installing Cabinet Vision. I think the first year I was there, I was away for 41 weeks of the year. So,
really?
Interstate travel, like basically, fly out Sunday night, fly home Friday night type deal. banked a lot of miles. But the good thing is I saw a lot of shops, like it
Oh
was
yeah.
a new shop every week, and it was, it was intense. It was like 5 days on site with a shop, and so every week was a new shop.
And were these all new integrations?
Yeah, yep,
I see.
yeah. So typically, sometimes upgrades, new machinery and things like that.
Yep.
And it was funny. The guy that was like the guru at Planet at the time in Australia is a guy called Shannon, and we became really good friends. But he thankfully probably made me learn the hard way. Like I walked in and he had all the knowledge, and I was like, asking him some questions, and he was like, "Nobody gave me the answers, buddy. Find your own way."
Yep.
Like, all right. So, I learnt the hard way, kind of like, and it's sort of like that throughout my career, really. It was sort of whichever place I've gone, I've kind of fallen into a situation where I've just had to learn
Yep.
software. And it's the hard way, but it can be the right way, because you do learn probably a lot deeper when there's no one to lean on. You know what I mean? There's no
Oh,
one to
you
fall
do.
back on.
Well, and I
Yeah.
think too, like, like you just said, being on the road 41 out of 52 weeks,
Yeah.
you run into situations you could never see coming. You could never learn from a video or a book or a colleague. Like,
Yeah.
you literally just fall into like someone else's problems, the way they build their world, and you got to
Yeah.
figure it out on the fly. And I think that's something that a lot of people don't know about, like, training, is that
Yeah.
you always think that your trainer has been in this exact spot before,
Oh,
and it's
yeah.
not always true, right?
Yeah.
And you kind of are doing your best with the skills that you have and come up with a good outcome. And
100%.
yeah,
And,
so I can resonate with that very much so.
And I mean, you're walking into cabinet shops, and everyone does things differently, right? Like, you're seeing new machinery, you're seeing
Oh
new
yeah,
fasteners, you're seeing like different approaches. And sometimes you see some things and you just think like, that's crazy. Like, you're doing something the hardest possible way.
yep,
But it takes a lot of experience and time to kind of know, like, okay, when should you really maybe lean on your own experience and guide people
mm-hmm.
to a better way, without being like, you don't want to kind of be that like cocky software guy that's like,
No,
hey, I know the best way. And it's like, half these guys have been building cabinets for longer than I've been alive. So I'm like, I'm
yep.
not gonna
Well,
walk in here and
how do
tell
you
you.
approach that spot then? Like, um, when you know that you can add value if you just bring up, hey, if you do it this way,
Yeah.
you could save time or this or that, but you also don't want to come across as
Yeah.
it's a delicate balance. How do you approach that balance?
For me, my approach was always like, I'm going to set it up the way they want, the way they've asked me to set it up. And then I'm also going to set it up in a way that I feel like would add value. And I'm going to show them both options. So I'm going to say, like, hey, like, I think you have to diffuse the situation first and be like,
Of
I'm not
course.
going to say I'm not going to do what you want it to do. Like, let's do that. Hey, I've like, I go to a different shop every week. Like, I see a lot of things. There's some stuff that I think could be cool that you could, that
Mm-hmm.
might benefit you, and kind of approach it pretty delicately. But I like to do it by showing both. I think like if you diffuse the situation of going like, it'll do it your way. So let's just take that off the table. It's like, it's not a no, it's not
Right.
it's not going to work. Like, we'll do it your way. But like, if we can have the opportunity to show you, an alternate route, then like, why not look at that? So I feel like most people kind of, and you're spending a week with people, so it's probably easier in that stage where like, over a few
Yep.
days you start to build rapport, you start to build trust, and
I
yeah,
was
you
just
get
gonna
that
say it only
opportunity to have
takes
that.
like the first suggestion to
Yeah.
be a slam dunk, and then they just seem to relax and be so much more open to future suggestions.
And look,
And it depends on the person too, but I think you're right about that.
in most of these situations, I mean, like, when they're installing software, typically they'll buy in a machine. Like, these guys were like stressed out, I mean, they're invested, like, this is the biggest investment they've ever made in their life. You know what I
Yep.
mean? Like, they're going, okay, like I bought a brand new CNC, I bought a new compressor, I've bought a new dust extraction system. I'm like, I've upgraded the electrical wiring to my factory. I'm
Mhm.
like, they're $250,000 into the hole here,
Right.
going
A
like,
lot of them
okay,
are all in at this point.
you
Yeah.
know, I'm all in. This is scary. And like, then you got a software guy turning up telling you like, that you should really consider changing everything else in your business. Like, come on,
Yeah.
man. I mean, so you got to kind of temper like, what you can see versus like how stressed out this person is. And I was always to a point where like I would like hold back on any suggestions until that CNC machine was cutting and
Hmm.
making dust. And
Yep. See some progress.
I'd try and get people to that point as quick as we could, because at that point, you could like visibly see somebody's like shoulders drop, like,
Hmm.
you see him take a deep breath. Like, I love that moment. You see the owner
Yes.
standing there, everyone's like freaking out. And it's funny, like as an integrator, as someone like installing the software and connecting a CNC machine, that's your like most like scary moment, because you're like,
Hmm.
damn, I hope this thing works. I hope, I haven't keyed in something wrong and I'm gonna plunge a tool through the bed. So like you're kind of like,
Yep.
I'm there like, usually holding the controller, like dialing it to a manual mode and like dialing it right back and like watching the tool come down and just,
Yep.
ready to like hit the E-stop, and everyone's like, what's happening? Is it doing something? I'm like, it's just,
You can
and
you
then,
can do 1,000 integrations if you still don't clench a little bit on that
oh,
first pass. Like
yeah.
you don't have a heartbeat anymore. Like
And
it is
it's
such
scary
a
now. I mean, back then, like I said, I'd have the controller in my hand, but now we do it all via
right.
Zoom, via Teams, and or
Yep.
via TeamViewer or something like that. And like I tell people like, hey, like, run an air test, like no material on the machine, no tool in the machine, no tool in
Yep.
the chuck, like let's just do an air test. And people are like, you can hear it, like they start the machine, I'm listening to my headphones and like I can hear like, "Meow." I'm like, are you cutting? They're like, yeah, it's cutting. I'm like, oh, like, like, okay, cool.
Well,
It's
how's
good,
it going? Yeah.
yeah. I guess that's kind of. I spent a long time doing that. I think 3 years into that role, I was pretty burnt out. Like I was looking
I
for a
bet.
change, and Planet were good. They kind of gave me different opportunities. I'd moved into a sales role for a while, and that was a new experience for me. Like I'd sort of, I guess I never really saw myself as like a salesperson. And I had to probably challenge my mindset on like what a salesperson was and what that meant as well, because,
Hmm.
I guess you grow up with experiences with being sold something, and, like you go and buy a car, it's like, you get the used car salesman kind of, treatment, and you get probably the wrong connotation in your mind of like what that is. But
Hmm.
the guy I mentioned earlier, Jamie, he had also followed me over from Microvellum to Cabinet Vision, and he was the leading sales rep, and probably still to this day like the best kind of salesperson I've ever worked with. He's sort of one of those guys of like he could sell ice to an Eskimo.
Hmm.
And it was really interesting for me to like observe like how he went about things, and like I feel like I learned a lot from sales from him, and that's kind of it was really interesting. Like his approach was so different to everyone else at Planet as well. Like he
Hmm.
mostly even in visual like appearances and things, right? Like he we were we would walk into cabinet shops and we were told to be wear like dress pants, wear slacks, wear a collared shirt, wear a jacket,
Hmm.
like you look like you're in a suit and tie walking into a cabinet shop. I mean, you look like you don't fit in. You're out of place.
100%.
And Jamie was kind of one of those guys who would turn up in flip flops and shorts and a a t-shirt with holes in it, and
Hmm.
he didn't fit the profile. But man, people trusted him straight away because he didn't look like he was out of place. And
100%.
I
Yep.
learned a lot from that. I learned like, okay, you sales is like it's an interesting thing, man. I mean, you need to build rapport fast. You need to break down barriers. Like everyone,
Yep.
every shop you walk into feels like, you're there to deceive them. You're there to trick, and it's rarely the case, but I guess there are people out there that would operate that way, and everyone's
Hmm.
kind of fearful of that. But
Yep.
in the software world, it's kind of that you can add a lot of value, and you can see where it is, and it's like you really have to diffuse and break the ice. And I feel like there are people that are just exceptional at that, breaking ice and building trust really fast, and he
Yep.
was certainly one of those guys, and I feel like I learned a lot from him
Hmm.
on that. So
Nice.
yeah, moved into that sales role, I guess, and did that for a while, and then kind of moved into a more of a, well, we called it special projects at the time. It was kind of like, the fix it person, really, like, just across every aspect of the business, sort of like,
Sure.
what do you want to, if you need something changed, something implemented, I implemented a new CRM program, and, just kind of like got involved in all different aspects of the business. And that was interesting. And I guess my time there, came to an end when the company kind of went through a bit of a restructure. They had like hired an external HR company to come in and review everyone's roles, what everyone was doing, and kind of like, issue new employment agreements to everybody.
Hmm.
And I guess I didn't really see eye to eye with like the approach of what they were doing or how they went about it. And Jamie and I got to talking, and we're like, look, maybe it's time for us to venture out on our own and do our own thing.
I see.
So, we made
And
the
what
call
year
to,
was this, would you say?
I'd say roughly 2011, 2012,
Okay.
roughly that kind of
Yep.
time frame. And, so we left then, and we actually started a drafting business. So that was the first thing we did. We were like, hey, like, nobody can draw faster in Australia on cabinet vision than either of us. So like, we could do this thing really quick. And,
Mm-hmm.
what would take other people 3 hours to draw, we were pumping out in half an hour. So like we were quick, but we learned a lot of valuable lessons from that venture. It was that, you could be really good at something, but extracting information from people was a real art. Like
Mm-hmm.
drafting is a really hard gig because like often, and it's kind of no one's fault, but it's just a lot of like variables at play. We would,
Mm-hmm.
often you would go, okay, look, people like, do you want to charge for revisions or how does that work? Like you're trying to come up with a pricing structure that seemed fair so people could like, you know, know, okay, like if I'm going to give you this job to draw, that's what it's going to cost me. But then there's so much back and forth and so many revisions and so many changes that it was like, how do we account for that? And how do we price fairly so you can account for what it's going to, eventually wind up costing you? And often, like, you'd get plans and you look at it and be like, okay, we're missing like, this oven spec or this dishwasher spec or, this measurement's unclear. And like, honestly, most of the time, like a lot of things came down to like a check measure or just kind of missing something or like, not passing on a key piece of information. So there was a lot of wasted time back and forth going back to go
Yep.
before we could even spend that 30 minutes drawing the project. It was like we needed to waste 2 hours extracting the information from someone. And that made it really hard to be viable. It made it
Yeah.
really challenging for that
I
to be
believe
like
that.
a viable business. And we were kind of kicking the can with that for probably about 4 or 5 months, and we're approached by Cuisine, the cab master software program that I mentioned earlier, and they approached us and they were like, do you guys want to come and take a look at what we've got? And you could be the New South Wales kind of our region in Australia, like the New South Wales reseller of the software. And Jamie and I were kind of like, we thought about it, and Jamie, we both had the mindset of like, I don't know, we're like we've been at Microbell and we've been at Cabinet Vision. We kind of don't want to be those guys in the industry, for lack of a better word. It was kind of
Jump
like, you
around.
don't want to
Yeah.
be, yeah, you don't want to be those kind of guys that are like, every week selling something new. It didn't really fit, and we didn't really. We kind of just, I don't know. We avoided it for a little while, and then eventually we're like, you know what, we'll come and have a chat. Like, so we flew down. They're in Victoria and Melbourne, another state. So we went down there and had a chat to them. And at the time, they had someone that was like their reseller. And I think the contract that they had at the time, this reseller needed to produce around 250,000 of software in the region over the span of a year to maintain the contract. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think he was like roughly hitting like 10% of that target, like, just nowhere near like where it needed to
Wow.
be. And, they kind of explained to us like, what the software, they showed us what it looks like. We'd seen it before, but, we kind of get a behind the scenes kind of view of things, and really, really good people. Like, I guess what attracted us to it was that actually the people were really good, like really nice people, genuine, like, genuine people. And I think like we thought, well, we'll give this a go, so like we decided to give it a go. And, as was mentioned to you, Jamie had a real talent for sales. And, I was kind of the like, the guy that could do everything else. So he was like, I'll sell it, you make it work, That was kind of like how we
Yeah.
sort of we didn't have a business plan as such. It was a think on your feet kind of situation. And he was like, I can sell this and I know you can make it work. So like let's trust each other in that concept,
Mm-hmm.
and we'll move forward. And sure enough, man of his word, the next week he had sold one.
Nice.
I'd only just got a license of it myself, and I'm like, okay, I guess I'm installing this thing in a couple of days. Let's go, So, and I
That's
had to
awesome.
learn, like they used en route as their back
Sure.
end, and I had to learn how to write a post. Like while I was on site at a customer for the first time, pretty
Yep.
much seeing this software for the first time. It was
Love
like
it. Love
drinking
it.
from a fire hose, and
Yeah.
trying to keep one step ahead, right? And
Mm-hmm.
but we looked at that software, and we knew like, okay, it's crazy, man. Because I mean, you could walk like it wasn't as good as Cabinet Vision, if I'm being honest. Like
Mm-hmm.
but we realized, okay, it could probably do 70 to 80% of what Cabinet Vision could do. but it was half the cost. So
Right.
value was our
Yep.
selling point, right? We knew
And
that
for
like
a certain customer, it's the perfect option, right?
100%, right? It was like we realized, okay, we'll go after companies that are doing builders kitchens, we call them in Australia. It's like, like kit homes. Like if you're
Hmm.
basically you buy a house off the plan and it comes with this kitchen and no one can
Yep.
modify it. I mean, we knew like that
Track
was,
home here in
yeah,
America is what it's called.
cool.
Track
Yeah.
homes. Yep. Yep.
So that is the perfect bread and butter for this software, right? So we're like, okay, cool, let's do that. Let's target those companies. And there are a lot of them out there. So, Jamie just went from place to place selling this thing. And
Hmm.
I think in our first year, we had sold over 500,000, in stark contrast to where the previous
Yeah,
person
like
representing the software was.
20x the previous guy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
that's
that,
something.
yeah, that certainly came from a team effort of like a guy that was better at selling something than anyone I've ever met. And my skill was just making it happen,
Yep.
and word of mouth was kind of the thing there, right? You started to get traction, you started to get customers like, recommending the software, recommending us. And,
Hmm.
like I think the number one lesson I learned from all of that was like people buy from people. It was like
Absolutely.
they were buying an inferior product because they wanted to do business with Jamie and I. It was like
Yep.
that was it, and that was it in a nutshell. I really realized that it was like if you turn up and you're a pleasant person to work with, you can add value. It was like it didn't really matter like that the software didn't have all the features it needed to have.
Hmm. That
People could kind of
is
like overlook that based on you're going to keep fighting for it to improve, and we
absolutely.
trust you
Yep.
guys, and we value you guys. And yeah, it was kind of,
That's like the biggest thing, biggest mindset shift for any entrepreneur or anybody going
yeah,
to do their own thing is it's not about having a perfect product. It's not about being the best at this or the best at that. It's about that relationship. People
yep,
buy from people they like, and it's
yep,
that simple. And obviously, the product can't suck, right?
yeah, for sure,
But
right?
it doesn't have to be the best. You can improve it along the way. Um, yeah.
That was probably the turning point for me, right? Like, we had grown this thing to we were pulling in over $1 million in revenue a year, a couple of years down the line.
Hmm.
And we got to a point where it was like we were adding like so much income to the company, yet we weren't seeing the product move forward quick enough. And
I
like
see.
software space moves quick, and
Hmm.
we were kind of feeling frustrated that we were, we'd felt like we'd held up our end of the bargain. Like we can make this work. We can sell this thing. We can support it. We can do all of it. You guys don't really need to do a thing. Like we'll run our own race.
Yep.
And we really wanted the other end of the bargain to be held up. Of like we had a list. Personally, I had a list of 5 things, and I presented them to the owner of the company. It was kind of like a weird setup where it was like 2 separate companies. One
I see.
company would develop the front end of the software, and then the other company would kind of develop what we called like the middleware of the software. So you had to get a lot of people buy in on like on what to do and how to do it. And I knew that there was like these 5 areas of weakness that if we could fix that, we could really make this thing work and go. We were pretty hungry at the time to like keep growing our business, and
Hmm.
like we realized that there was things holding us back. And I'd given it like 2 years, and half of one of the things had been semi integrated into the
Yep.
software, and got to
It's
a point
hard.
where I
It's hard
was,
to stay patient at that point.
it is,
Yeah.
I get it. By this stage, I'd been involved in software for a long time. I knew things didn't move fast, and I kind of used to it, but at the same time feeling like, okay, I didn't really feel like there was enough change in the air, enough like happening, that I felt like I wanted to see what else was out there. I wanted to kind of like just make
Hmm.
sure that we were I realized the value in what we were doing was in the two of us, right? And like what we had built a team around us then, and I was like, if there's a better option out there, we need to know about it. So we were actually, that was pretty much then 2019. We were like, okay, the AWFS show in Vegas is on in July. Let's fly over. So myself, Jamie, and our entire team went over. There was like 5 of us that flew over
I
to
see.
Vegas for the event. We spent 3 days. We went to every software company in the exhibition and had a
Just
deep
as like
dive
a
of what
fact
we're getting.
finding mission, just to see what was
Yeah,
out there.
really see what's out there and understand, like, kind of understand maybe 2 things, like was what we were asking for unrealistic and unreasonable,
Yep.
and is there another option out there that doesn't exist in Australia that should exist?
Yep.
Like what options are there? And we had looked at a lot of different applications, and to be honest, most things we looked at were pretty underwhelmed. There was a
Hmm.
lot of options out there, but they all had pretty big shortcomings, and we felt like, I guess, the what we were already representing felt like a better option. And
Yep.
then I'd heard the stories like through my Cabinet Vision years that Roger Taylor had created Cabinet Vision, or part of your co-created Cabinet Vision, and then went on to create Mozaik. And I'd looked at it. I think like actually I subscribed to the software back in 2013, just as I don't know,
I
like
see.
just as a personal thing. I just wanted to look at it to see what it could do. I think I was like in the top 50, like
I say
first
that had to be
subscribers
pretty
kind of
early.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like I remember looking at it thinking, there was a lot of things it didn't do yet, right? I looked at it and thought, oh, like it was originally launched for the American market. So in Australian market, it's like some real kind of key differences. Like we only really use metal sided drawers. Like that's
Hmm.
95% of our market. Like we don't really build a 5-piece drawer box. At
Yep.
the time, Mozaik didn't have a metal sided drawer option, right? And it was like there were things that were just like deal breakers, like that it won't work in this market until ABC is added. I looked at it and then, kind of went on with what I was doing, right? And yeah, then I had kind of walked around the store. I really wanted the opportunity to meet Roger, more from the fact of like, kind of having used Cabinet Vision for so long, I kind of just wanted to meet the guy. There
Oh
was a bit
yeah.
of that kind of like
Yeah.
I don't know, like meeting someone that you admire in that sense, like
Hmm.
and we walked around for a lot because he was always busy. It's like let's circle back,
Yep.
and um finally got the opportunity to have a chat with him, and we'd explained what we were doing over there, and he had a good chat with us, probably for about 10 minutes, 10 15 minutes, something like that. And I could see, I could see he's like a genuine person right away. I think that was like kind of something that I walked away thinking like, he wasn't trying to sell us anything. He wasn't like, I feel like there's people you meet along the way and like quickly they're trying to like, how do I
Yep.
get value from this guy? Or how do I, and that's not Roger at all. Like it was just one of those guys that's like, whether the conversation was happening or not meant kind of nothing in the grand scheme of things to him, right? It was kind of like, I don't need this.
Hmm.
There's something about that was like, I felt comfortable that I'm talking to someone that's like, he's not trying to like deceive me or trick me, or I don't know, like there's just
Yep.
that level of like genuine person, a real genuine person. And I kind of like we he was like, he asked one of the guys to give us a look through, and a trainer at the time, his name was Ian. He's no longer there, but
I
great
I
guy,
know
really.
I know Ian.
Ian, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Man, if you've ever kind of worked with Ian, like his approach to a demo is like, I don't know, like if we can like swear in this thing, but like every second
Go
word was
for
a curse word. He was just like,
it. Yep.
it's like, what do you want? This effing thing does everything. I was, it's just like, it's hilarious. But
Yeah.
we had a pretty extensive list of the things we wanted to see, and it was like, how do you do this? How do you do that? And like to his credit, man, everything I asked, he was just able to just show me on the spot. And
Hmm.
there was kind of two things that stood out to us. It was like how fast it was. Like we were kind of always battling performance like in speed with
I see.
Cabinet Vision and Cabmaster. Like they were both Cabinet Vision from a perspective of UCSs, just clog it down and make it challenging to keep it stable and to keep it operating at a quick speed, and then Cabmaster for different reasons. And it was like just watching him fly around through Mozaik, and it was just not slowing down. I was just like,
Hmm.
damn, it's pretty crazy. We'd thrown some curveballs his way. And so we're like, okay, in a nutshell, does what we want. It's fast, and the price was right. And we're like, why the hell isn't this thing in Australia? This is insane. This not only competes, but like should dominate. It's just this is pretty wild. And
And
you
you
know,
came to that realization within the first 20 minutes?
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
honestly, for me, probably 3 minutes in, but
Yeah.
I was kind of like, I guess I'd done my homework. I'd kind of known like what the options out there were, and it's funny, like we walked on to I think it was the Vero stand at the time. I don't think it was Hexagon back then. Might have been. I can't quite recall. The
Hmm.
Cabinet Vision stand, regardless, and I'd still known people because I'd over the years of my time at Cabinet Vision, I'd flown over, I'd been to development meetings, I'd been to reseller,
Sure.
conferences. Like I'd met a lot of the team in the States, guys like Chip Martin, key people involved in the product. It's funny, like I remember walking up and having a chat to Chip at the show, and I'm like, who are you guys worried about? Like, who are you competing with? And he went out of his way to not say Mozaik. Like it was,
Yeah.
and I had to prompt, what about Mozaik? And he was like, Nah, they're just a speed bump, you know, like it was a his reaction was told me everything I needed to know. It was
Yep. You
you
could
know,
see right through it.
these are the guys we're truly worried about, you know.
Yeah.
And so I kind of had a pretty good feeling before we even, and like we kind of saved Mozaik for last, really realizing it was probably going to be the, you know, the option that we, but you know, funny like turn of events, because the someone on the stand was like, oh, you guys are from Australia, we've got an Australian here on the stand. And you know, they introduced us to a gentleman named Michael, who happened to be the person that we had replaced at Cabmaster. The guy that I mentioned was not meeting the targets, and
Yeah.
you know, and it was like a, oh man. And you know, we thought, okay, well, like we knew straight away, okay, well, you know, there's a reason why it's probably not working in Australia. Like we'd seen,
Hmm.
you know, like where it was going. I said to Roger, like, hey, you know, like we can see you've got someone here. If that doesn't work out, here's our details. You let us know. We'll leave the ball in your court type thing. And
Yep.
that was it, man. It was July. We flew home. I think it wasn't until about November that, you know, probably 2 a.m. in the morning, I got a text message from Roger and just said, didn't work out with the last guy. Would you like an opportunity? And, you know, the first thing I did the next
So
morning,
no communication between leaving the
no,
show and that moment.
yeah, that
I
was it.
assumed you thought it was over, or
Yeah,
like
pretty much.
just kind of a
Yeah.
dead.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. We were like, well, okay, well, like, you know, we'll see if this Michael guy is able to make it work and see what happens. And
Yep.
um, yeah, you know, we kind of walked away thinking, you know, I guess like there was mixed feelings, and within the five of us, it was kind of like, you know, some of the feelings were like, I hope that never comes to Australia because, you know, we don't want to compete with it.
Yep.
And I'm like, interesting. It's kind of like I said to my business partner at the time, Jamie, I'm like, man, like, I'm like, that's like an approach of like a DVD company like Blockbuster saying, I hope Netflix never takes off. Like, what do you like, you know, it's like a bad way to operate your business, you know, like I think at
Yep.
some point you're going to be like, I don't know, if you're not first, you're last, you know, like that was my mindset. Like
Yep.
we can sit here and hope that this thing never takes off and hope that this like subscription model never, you know, never kind of infiltrates our region, or we can be the early adopter and be the one that like that brings it to the region and, you know, and kind of
Yep.
get on board. And I guess the struggle, like I said to you, like Jamie's kind of the guy that like, you know, could sell anything, but he wanted to sell something. The thrill of the chase to a salesperson is like it's what they live and breathe, you know.
Yep.
And move into a subscription type situation was not him, you know. That there's like, you know,
Hmm.
just not kind of selling Mozaik is easy. Like, you know, getting people to kind of like sign up and give it a try is not the challenge. You know, the
Right.
challenge is everything that happens after that, you know,
Yep.
servicing it well, getting them onboarded, you know, getting people to renew a subscription. You know, that's the challenge. That's the
Hmm.
business model. And you know, Jamie and I had a chat after Roger's text, and Jamie was like, you know, nah, look, I want to keep selling something. That's just not. I'm not, you know, I'm not really wanting to get on board with the subscription model. And I said, look, you know, I don't know. For me, like, it's never been like, not. I've never been motivated by money. Like, I'm not. That's just not what drives me. And I wanted to represent what I felt was the best software. To me, that was the important bit. And trying to fill
Yep.
gaps, and you know, trying to find workarounds to everyone's problems, and that gets
Yep.
tiring. You know, it gets to a point where you're like, okay, if you're not going to improve the software, and I'm going to have to keep, because often it felt like it came back on me. Like, you know, I'm
Right.
installing this stuff, and it's like it needs to do more. Like we need to be better, and you know, I have that drive to be better, and I have that drive for the software to be better. And when it wasn't being better and wasn't getting better, it was like I've got to jump to something that I felt like was
Yep.
was progressing. And I'd seen the progression. I mean, I'd seen it from what I saw in 2013 to what I saw in 2019. 5 years
Yep.
later, I was like, damn, this thing's come a long way. And
Hmm.
you know, talking to Roger about like what the plans were and what was coming along the way, it was like, man, like, you know, this we've got to get him on board on this now. And so
Yep.
that was pretty much like, by this stage, we're talking late December, pretty much end of the year and of 2019. And Roger said, the opportunity is there if you want it. And he said, if you want, like, fly over, come over to Tuscaloosa. We'll sit you down with a trainer, and we'll get you kind of a deep dive into how Mozaik works and show you everything and kind of get you onboarded in the system and give you the opportunity. And Jamie and I were still trying to figure out what we're doing. And I said to Jamie, like, I'm doing this kind of like it's, you know, with or without you type deal. And
Yep.
I guess we decided to separate and go separate ways at that point, right?
Hmm.
And he said to me, he's like, look, he goes, I just don't want to be your competitor at the end of the day. He's like, we were friends. I mean, you know, he was like, he spoke at my wedding. It was like,
Right.
we're more than business partners, we're close friends. And it was kind of like I guess we didn't really want to compete with each other, but at the same time, it was, I think you get to a point in any business, and, we'd probably been in business for 7 years together by this stage, that was like, I think that every kind of business where you go into it with a partner, I feel like it's a transient thing.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say to people like, and I give people this advice now, and people say like, they're going to start something up, and they're going to start something like as a partnership with a friend or somebody. And I'm like, look, that's cool, but go into it with the mindset of like, it's not forever, because like,
Mm-hmm.
I think there's no way in reality that two people can kind of go through their life and be on the same trajectory for an extended period of time. At some point,
Yep.
like somebody's trajectory is going to change, somebody's going to want to pivot, and we'd worked together brilliantly for 7 years, but then to the point where we wanted different things and we wanted to go in different directions. So that's the reality of kind of like,
Yep.
starting a business with a friend. At some point, like, you're going to have to make a difficult decision. And
Yep.
we
And
made
so
that
you got
call.
on a plane to Alabama.
That was the plan. But then, breaking news the next day was COVID.
Yes, COVID. Yeah, yeah.
So, that was, man, interesting timing in so many ways. Like I couldn't fly over, and, that kind of stalled things a little bit, right? And it was kind of, Roger was like, let's just see how this thing plays out. Let's press pause for a minute. And
Yep.
at the same time, I'd kind of already exited the business, and, we were going through a process of like, meeting with accountants and, business valuers to try and figure out how to value the business, to try and figure out like, was Jamie going to buy me out? How was that going to work? Like what did that picture look like? And a 1 in 100-year event like COVID was like, you can't value a business at that point in time.
Right.
No one knew what was going to happen. No one knew how that was going to play out at that
Mm-hmm.
point, right? And the valuer was like, you guys just need to dissolve this thing, split it 50-50 and walk away. I guess I kind of got the raw end of the deal in that sense, that it was like, but we didn't know at the time. We didn't know, to
Yep.
be fair, like we didn't know which direction that was going to go. That's what we did. We sort of dissolved the company. We kind of, split everything 50-50, and then just, went our own direction. He started a new company with the same team, with the same setup, basically had a running head start of,
Yep.
continuing on. And I was in this kind of limbo stall mode between, okay, like, what are we doing? Am I going to be able to come over and learn this thing? I kind of like gave half of a business to somebody, and I'm
Yep.
like in this, oh, now what's going to happen? Like, am I even going to like kick off Mozaik and launch with it, or like what's gonna be next? So I was kind of like all in, right? Like, and I had I guess a handshake agreement with Roger, and there was no contract, there was no written agreement. It was I guess I value, like, one of my skill sets is being able to read people, like being a decent judge of character. And I felt comfortable right away that I felt like I could trust Roger, and that, he was a man of his word, and that handshake agreement meant more to him than what was written on any piece of paper.
Mm-hmm.
And my wife and I spoke about it at the time. It was kind of like, hey, like, this is a kind of a big call. I trust you, but like, are you sure you're doing the right thing? And I just said, look, my gut tells me yes, and we're just going to see how this plays out. And I guess it got to a point where I was like, okay, there's the borders aren't going to reopen anytime soon. Like, I think we're just going to have to like send me a copy of the software and just let me learn this thing. So
Yep.
we did that, and he'd sent me a couple of leads like for website inquiries, and I spoke to a couple of those companies, and one of them signed up on, I think it was like on a Thursday of like, this was like March, 2020 at this point. And I'd got access to Mozaik on Friday morning, early hours of Friday morning, and I had the first training session booked in for Monday morning to teach these guys how to use it.
Amazing.
So,
Amazing.
I had three whole days. I said, basically, I'm not going to sleep for 3 days. I'm going to learn this thing. And I consumed every video I could find. I read every forum article I could get my hands on. Like, it was kind of like a deep dived into like just trying to understand how this thing works, and had to be far enough ahead of the customer that I was teaching that I could add
Yep.
some value in some way. But
That's the key. As an early trainer or an early adopter or someone trying to get their foot in the door, you don't have to know everything. You just got to be a step or two ahead to be able to add value to that customer at that time, and keep improving, man. That's amazing.
But if I look back on that training session, man, I'm glad it wasn't recorded.
I'm sure. I'm sure you would cringe. Yep. That's amazing. So how long did it take to really start to get some traction with Cadmate? Because was that when was Cadmate founded at the same time?
Yeah, founded in March 2020. So basically
Yep.
that week really. And yeah, look, traction came pretty quick, really. It was just me. I was wearing every hat, so it was like, I was looking at it. I knew, like, okay, the first thing I had to do was, like, I guess the one thing in hindsight, the mistake that I made in my previous business, and I kind of knew this walking into Mozaik, was like I was comfortable being the behind the scenes person. I let Jamie be the face of the company. I was happy being the guy making it all work and pulling the strings, and really probably in some ways adding more value, but really nobody knowing. And I'd learned that lesson of like, okay, actually you need to put your face to it. You need to be
Yep.
comfortable doing that. And I guess that was a hard lesson to learn, but also a good lesson to learn in business. Like so I took that into this venture and thinking, okay, like, I'm going to be quite forward in putting myself out there. And I guess that's sort of that snowballed along the way in different things. Like the first thing that I did was like, okay, it's just me. If I'm going to be selling this, supporting this, answering all the emails, taking all those inquiry phone calls and doing all the training, like I'm going to need to find a way to kind of automate some of this, because it's going to be a little while before there was enough income coming in to support hiring a person, right? It was
Right.
like, if I put someone on, we're gonna there's gonna be no money to pay their bills. So that was really the kind of concept of the mastery course originally. Like I was like, okay, I need to create, like I need to dump everything that I know into a system and kind of
Yep.
get that out there to help onboard people. And I'd learned, like what I said, yeah, I learned the hard way in a sense of like I was bouncing around between forum posts and videos, and there was no structure to any of it. It was
Right.
challenging because I was
Yep.
like, look, I kind of wanted for someone to sit me down and go like, here's the process from start to finish. And that's what I'd created with the mastery course. It was like I really wanted to guide people through this in a logical step-by-step manner that made
Yep.
sense. And
So really, it was a helpful tool for the community, but it was also a helpful tool for you. Like you were trying to basically,
I thought to myself,
cover for not being able to hire a person to help, basically, in a way.
100%. And I thought to myself, well, like, when I do hire someone, I can't, when you do hire someone in business, it often detracts before it adds value, right? It
That's
takes
right.
more away from your time. And I thought to myself, like, even when it gets to the point of hiring someone, if then I'm going to like burn 50% of my time teaching them, that's going to make it harder as well. So I thought, well, if I create this course, then, I'm going to create it in a way that I'd want to onboard someone into my business as well. So,
Yep.
that was kind of also part of the mindset.
What was
But yeah, I
Roger's
mean,
take on the course when you told him you were going to do it?
I didn't tell him I was going to do it. I just kind
I
of
see.
created it, and then I sent him a link and sort of said, "Hey, like, here's what I'm doing. Just, full disclosure. This is like," and he, I think I basically got like a looks good,
Yeah.
2-word reply,
Short and sweet.
short and sweet. Like from start in March, we had like I think we had 35 customers in the Australia and New Zealand region. I think on like number wise, I think around 200 people had tried it, but 35 had stuck with it, right? So,
Hmm.
retention was low,
Yep.
overall customer count was low. And I realized straight away, like I said, reading people's kind of like one of the things that I try and do. And I realized I looked at Roger and think, he's a busy person. Like I can add value, and like kind of going back to like my mom's advice from the start of my career was like, be helpful, add value, and
Hmm.
I realized that like my value to Roger was like in making it work, like taking care of the Australian and New Zealand region, seeing that that it was growing and asking no questions. It was like
Yep.
don't add to his plate, like he's a busy man, like, don't add to his plate, don't detract from his time, just get it done, see that it's progressing, and then that's the value, right? I can do for him. And
Yep.
that was how I approached it. So, but quickly we went from 35 customers to I think within a few months, like we're up around 100 customers. So like we had kind of
Nice.
grown quickly. And,
Hmm.
it was at this point, like, 3 or 4 coming on, you know, every week. And it was like, okay, that 3 or 4 turned on to 5 or 10, and it just kept snowballing from there. And, I'd been in the industry for a long time. So like I'd had a lot of contacts, I'd known a lot of people, and I was able to go to like all the, machinery companies and people that I knew in the industry and say, look, hey, this is what I'm doing. This is a product. This is what it's about.
It's huge.
100%. So, I guess I leveraged those relationships to get that snowball effect early, to get people trusting. I'd got most of the machinery kind of vendors on board with understanding the value. Just not like selling Mozaik, not but like a seat at the table was all I wanted. Like, hey, like when you're out there and someone asks about software, just give us a seat at the table. Let them know that Mozaik exists, and we'll add value. Like
it's huge.
we can add value. And I guess the Mozaik's business model made so much sense for machinery companies. It's like, as a software vendor selling software at on a perpetual situation, right, where you're buying it outright, you're competing for the sale, really. Like, it's like, are you spending $50,000-$60,000 on software and then trying to spend $80,000, $90,000, $100,000 on a CNC machine? Often most people were left in a situation of like, okay, maybe I need to either buy the cheaper machine, so maybe I can't spend my money with company ABC. I need to go to company
that's a good point.
Cheaper option.
I've never really thought about it that way. It's a good point.
Or the decision was often made, I can't get the onload and offload, table. I'm going to have to just get the machine because I need to package the software. And most people did it that way. That was the most common way we sold software for years. It was like bundled packages where it was like you bought the machine and the software and it all went through one finance, because no one wants to, I don't know what it's like in the States, but in Australia, like no companies want to finance software. Like you can't get a loan for software. It's not tangible. You can't repossess it. It has no value,
Right.
So the only way people would get a business loan to buy software and machinery was to package it with the machine. It was a part of the machine package, right? And machinery companies felt that frustration. They felt like, wow, man, we had to take 30 grand off our sale through like the onload and offload table to allow enough in there for the company to buy software. And it was like, that wasn't conducive to good business for the machinery companies, and it wasn't the right decision for the cabinet maker. People are like getting a inferior product because I don't know, like I tell everyone, like, if there's one thing you can afford to buy, get the offload table. It doubles your production. Like,
absolutely. If
it takes 5 or 10 minutes to cut a sheet, you're going to spend 5 or 10 minutes labeling it. It's just real basic math. Like you will double your production if you get an offload table. And it was kind of hard for me to watch that many people were not getting that through not being able to afford it. So I positioned Mozaik that way. You could get Mozaik, it'll do what you need. There's really low commitment. You commit 3
almost
months.
No barrier to entry at all, really.
Right. And the barrier really was like being able to deliver on it and making it suitable for the Australian market, as well. So like it was like local hardware options, local material suppliers. We do build things differently. We're a different market. So people, and it's really a lot of it. Honestly, a lot of it just comes back to terminology. Like over here, like dado we would refer to as a mortise and tenon. So like when people like looking at a spec sheet on a website, going, does it do mortise and tenon, and not putting 2 and 2 together that's a dado. It just, things were not computing. There was a reason why it wasn't taking off. Was just a lot of people just wanted to have a conversation with someone that they could connect with to go, will this work? And my approach was always like, who knows? But any sales rep can sit here and tell you that everything's going to be great. Like, but with this model, you can try it and you tell me if it's great.
Yep, the proof is in the pudding with this model. That's for sure.
I mean, that was my favorite saying, because 100% like that is the reality of it. And I knew I was competing against Jamie at this point too, and against the guys at Cabinet Vision, and going like, okay, my strength was going to be getting people to give it a go and then work with me, because that was like, I guess where it had always been of like, I know I'm going to build rapport with people, and I know I'm going to make it work for them. I kind of spent a lot of time in that that first year of going like, let's get the systems in place, because I know this is going to grow. I know this is going to scale, and I want to have systems in place. I want to have the right structure. I want to have the right automation. I had set up CRM systems. I'd set up like, phone systems. I'd had everything dialed as if we were a company, with 20 people as opposed to one person. Right. Yep. And knowing that, at some point in time, I was going to be able to make my first hire and continue scaling this thing. So
it's so smart to start that way. It's hard to do that when you're
Yeah.
scraping by, trying to grow something. It's hard to have that foresight, but
It helps that I'm like a bit of a tech nerd in that sense.
Mhm.
I love like watching reviews of new software and like what else is out there, what else can I do to automate things, and kind of like I was passionate about it, so it helped that I was like,
Yep.
there are ways I could do this much smarter, and and I guess that like the first thing I wanted to do was like, I kind of wanted to do the opposite to what everyone was doing. Like Cabinet Vision kind of had this like I think it said monopoly on the market, and it was kind of like it confused me. Like people were unhappy with the service they were getting, but they were so fearful that if they'd voiced that concern, that then they would be cut off and then they'd get even worse service, or even it's like
Crazy.
this like standover tactic. And it wasn't intentional, but that's kind of how it played out, right? It was just this
Mhm.
like, I can't say that I'm getting a bad experience, because if I say that, then I won't get any service. And it's like, man, that's a
Crazy.
so I thought to myself, like, how do I do this differently? And I thought, well, let's connect the people. And the concept of the Facebook group was born from there. I was like,
Yep.
I'm like, I know like what I do well is service the software right, have genuine conversations and be real with people. And if it's not the right option, then walk away. Like it's, no one's gonna, that's the Mozaik model, and I think that's the beauty of it. It's like, if it's not the right fit, cool, let's shake hands. Thanks for trying it. We appreciate your
Yep.
business, and like find something that is the right fit. Like,
Yep.
but you've lost 2 or 3 months of your time, a few $100s. Like, we're not talking about kind of
Yep.
crazy sums of money. You're not 60 grand in the hole wishing that you would like made a different decision. And I think
Yep.
that's like, that was the biggest difference. And so I thought to myself, well, we're probably not going to be in a situation where we have like a lot of people just, super unhappy, feeling like they're stuck and they're trapped. And it's like, well, let's connect the people. Let's get people talking about the software, and create the Mozaik user group. And that was the best thing I did. Like the
100%.
community sold more software than I ever could.
Yep.
At the end of the day, it was like getting everyone kind of recommending the software. And we've got a sort of a group in Australia called Cabinet Makers Australia, which, and you see this play out in like 2021, 2022. Like it went from like people asked about software, and you'd get like, Cabinet Vision, Cabmaster, Macrovella, Python. Like you'd get a bunch of recommendations, to then a year later, people asking about software recommendations, and like 50 people just commenting Mozaik. Like,
Yep.
and that changed in the space of a year, because
Amazing.
I built a community of people that were
Yep.
happy that, I brought to market an option that was more affordable, that came with the service that I like, I guess the standard that I wanted to deliver. Yeah.
Was that Facebook group a part of your early vision, or did that come after you had kind of got your feet wet a little bit?
I had a customer reach out and say, like the difficulty with the forum was not really knowing who was local, and like, kind of where,
Yep.
who they could connect with. It was kind of like people were behind aliases, and, that made it challenging. And he'd sort of really prompted the idea. He said like, he's like, hey, I'm going to create this Facebook group. Are you okay with that? And I was like, like, I think it's a good idea, but I was like, just so there's no kind of copyright concerns or, trademark concerns or anything like that, like, I'll create it. And he was the first member, and I was the admin of the group, I guess. And I
Yep.
also wanted to make sure I had a conversation with him about like, well, part of it is about protecting the I guess the reputation of the company and what I was building and everything like
Of
that as
course.
well. So
Yep.
and these groups, as man, they can turn negative so quick without
They can.
the right moderation. And I was vested in it, so I was like, like,
Yep.
I will put the time in to moderate this thing. And it's not about censorship or anything like that. It's about
No.
keeping a conversation like helpful. And the amount of people that have said to me like, they're in so many groups, and they're like, the group we have in Australia, and like they're like, that group's the only group that they're in that's positive, right? Like, and it's like, and there's so
Yep.
many others now, which is fantastic. But it's like, that was the thing. It was like, why was it positive? Because people were just trying to help each other,
Right.
and we wanted to keep the conversation like
Yeah. It is so
framed around
important
that.
to keep the train on the tracks going the right direction, because
Yeah.
social media in general, it's opened up very extreme outcomes, right? Like you just mentioned, within the course of a year, going from a smattering of cabinet softwares being recommended to like 80% of people saying Mozaik, right?
Yeah.
That doesn't happen without social media
100%.
or the community you built.
Yep.
And so you can kind of get these extreme shifts,
Yep.
but they can also be negative. And so you got to be very careful about how that goes. And it's
I
a
think
daily
overall, if you do the
thing.
right thing, if you service your product well, if you've got a good product to begin with and you service it well,
That's
and
right.
you do the right thing by people, then,
That's right.
that's going to come to the forefront. And, I feel like a lot of companies are afraid of, like, oh, what if all of our upset customers get together and talk, and and then that snowballs into more ups. I'm like, well, you're doing something wrong to begin with. If you've got that many people that are upset,
You got a
and
lot of
you're
other.
worried about them like creating a bit of
Yeah.
movement or momentum, then maybe you should like fix
You got a lot
what's not
bigger
working.
problems if that's what you're worried about.
That's
Yeah.
right. So like we it grew pretty quickly from there, and it wasn't I guess lose track of kind of the timeline of everything, but I'd say by the time we'd got to 2022, I think, where you and I met at the Atlanta trade show.
Atlanta for the first time. Yep.
Yeah. We were probably sitting around 600-700 customers by that stage, like two years in. So, and at that stage I'd hired a person, and like Jason on my team joined me. I trained him on Cabinet Vision years ago, and I'd sort of always like bookmark that in the back of my mind of like, this was a guy that had the right attitude, the right approach. He wrote questions down. He came back to me with a good list of questions, with ones that he'd crossed off that he'd already figured out himself, and just had the right approach, right mindset. And I knew he'd be kind of like someone that I'd want to work with if I sort of started my own thing.
And so he was your first call when you needed somebody. Nice.
I reached out to him early in the piece and said, look, this is what I'm doing. I'm like, I'll let you know when I'm at a point where I can hire someone if you're interested. And he said, look, 100%. He's like, I'd love to join. I'd love to be part of it if when you get to that stage. It's funny, like the timing of things we mentioned before, like I started the business, but like there was no income coming in. Like there was no, it was a long time before it was at a point where I could pay myself. And I'd sort of mentioned to Jason, like, since that, like, I'd actually paid him before I paid myself.
Yep.
So like for a good year, I was really like just scraping by, I'd sold my car and I was using that to fund, mortgage payments. I had like, for a little while there, we had the government support payments from COVID. So like, timing was perfect for that sense, but it was also terrible because I couldn't sell the previous business. So like there's, there's pros and cons in everything, but it was like, it's just funny how timing goes.
It's crazy how that all works out. And I think that's
say like, oh, you're fortunate, you're lucky that, you got involved when you did. And I'm like, well, make your own luck, because there was
you do. And we were talking about this at AWFS, like none of this is luck. It's all. Yeah.
I had to have the support of my wife as well to go like, hey, I'm basically going to not earn any income for a year. Are you going to be okay with that? And you do it because you can see the bigger picture, and you can see you're looking further ahead than where you're at. And
what's crazy about that, just to kind of like right around the same time, like we were in the same boat. What's the next venture? How are we going to pay for this? Figure it all out. And 4 years later, we're sitting here on a podcast talking to each other.
Funny,
nuts, man.
I crazy how the me at Atlanta, and wondering whether like how you should broach the conversation with Roger and how to.
That was one of the first questions I asked you. Yeah.
I was like, Roger's a genuine person. Like, just I feel like where a lot of people often go wrong with him is like they approach a conversation with like a hidden motive, or like he sees straight through it. And I'm like, look, just be real with him. I think he appreciates that. That's how we connected. It was through like, just be real.
That was huge for me. I just for people that don't know the backstory. So I actually reached out to Roger in March of 21, I think, to potentially become a Mozaik trainer, or just ask about it, I guess, inquire about it. And much like you had mentioned earlier, didn't really hear much, and then out of the blue, kind of got a message. And I did end up talking to Michael back in the day, years ago, and that ended up not working out. But and so that's when I kind of was like, all right, I got to figure something out here. I know I can help. I know I can add value. How do I figure this out? But it really didn't kick off until like the end of 2021. So then by the time August rolled around the next year, the Facebook group had started to pick up. It had started to become known that And I had not talked to Roger yet at all. Still had
Yeah.
never. And so I just like, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how
Yeah.
it was going to go. Um, so your insight was very helpful. Not that I wasn't going to be straightforward with him, but to hear that from you, to
Yeah.
hear your perspective was a big deal. And that meeting with Roger went great. He was very nice.
Yeah.
I still remember he tapped me on the shoulder when it was over and he said, just keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
And it was a very nice comment.
Yeah.
So I'm glad he could see that I was trying to do nothing but add value and, figure
What
it
it
out.
all keeps
So
coming back to, isn't it?
it is. Yep.
It's funny, you mentioned earlier about the wine rack
Yeah.
video that I posted, the 45-degree wine
I didn't
rack.
realize that was 3 months after you learned the software for the first time. My God, man.
Well, it was pretty strategic by me because I was like, hey, here's something that Cabmaster can't do. And so I led with that. Like I was like, oh, let's put things out here that like I know my competitors are struggling with.
Yep.
So pretty strategically creating videos of content that,
Yep, that's smart.
would position Mozaik as the more flexible option. And it was like yeah.
Yeah, let me ask this. So you mentioned realizing early on to kind of just take heat off Roger, don't ask questions.
Yep.
So because you weren't reaching out, how long before you heard from him that you were doing a good job? Because I'm guessing it wasn't immediate and it took some time.
It was about,
what was that time like? Kind of just waiting it out. Like you were seeing it growing, but you didn't.
I think I was busy. I was hoping. I hope he's happy with the result. Like I didn't really know. It was around about 6 months. Like it was a decent amount of time, long enough to be like, what's, is he happy with how this is going? Like, where are we at? And again, it was kind of one of those really short messages of like, looks like things are doing pretty well over there. There's a check in the mail. It was kind of like a
nice.
Cool. Okay.
Short
Sounds
sweet.
good.
Again.
That was sort of the gist of it. And yeah, in that time, like there was probably one other time that I guess I didn't really hear back from him, but I'd reached out and said like, hey, I feel like I'm getting my head around things now. Like I feel like I think like when you learn any software, and this is my kind of advice to most people is like you go through this phase of like you don't know what you don't know. And you don't know if something is your lack of knowledge of something or if it's just a lack of a feature that's not there. And that's the hardest bit of learning anything. Like that's the hardest portion to me is that timeline of that playing out. Like I feel like I'd learned the software pretty quick. I'd learned my way around. I was able to integrate it. I was able to get machines connected. I was able to get, things happening, people onboarded. But then those key elements where I'm like, is this a limitation of the software or is this a limitation of my knowledge? And that's the piece that's the hardest. And I just said, look, can I have an hour of someone's time, that whoever you've got that's like, the go-to person.
The best.
I want to spend an hour with someone and just, ask a bunch of deep questions and figure this out.
Was that Michael at the time?
Yeah. So I had a 1 a.m. kind of call with Michael. Australia time zones suck in that sense, working with companies all around the world. But I got up at like 1 a.m. and like I had a call with Michael, and I kind of realized too, like I was like, as much as this is like this is supposed to be helpful for me, I kind of realized this is probably also a bit of a like check in on this guy, see how he's doing. Like this was an interview as much as it's a training session.
As a training call.
Like that was my read on it, and like that was before the meeting. I kind of knew going into it. I'm like, well, like what would I do if I was in Roger's shoes? I'd be like, hey, suss this guy out, make sure he's, is legit. And so I had kind of entered that going like, I don't want to ask, too many stupid questions. I want to kind of these questions to be reasonably high level and, show Michael that I knew kind of what I'm doing, but like, I want to clarify a few things. And they were honestly at the time, based around limitations of like, at the time you could only have 4 fasteners per edge,
Right.
And I'm like, we often have like 7 or 8 screw holes on a tall, cabinet. And what's the best way to approach that? And Michael was really good. Like he gave me advice on like, you could create multiple, fastener templates and have, write some, pretty in-depth if then statements to have, the holes moving around and kind of catering for up to 8, based on that. And
Yep.
that was what I did, kind of like, I guess the sort of Cadmate library was born from there, because I was like, I need to make this thing like suitable for the Australian market. To get people onboarded quick, it needed to be, I didn't want people to reinvent the wheel. Like, what came out of the box, what was suitable for America was not what was suitable for
Yep.
Australia. So I had to change that, right? I had
Let's
to get
speak
it.
to that a little bit, because I bet a lot of the North American customers don't know what you do for your Australian customers in terms of uh, adapting it to the market, like in terms of the tooling library gets
Yep.
redone, the
Yep.
materials library got redone,
Yep.
the Cadmate
Yep.
library was free and set up for how you build in Australia.
Yeah.
It's
Even
a
all the
huge,
hardware as well. Like,
yeah.
we have like, we have like probably 50, and especially through COVID, this blew up. Like, I mean, like the biggest companies in the world had like struggles to get, shipments out to customers. Like most people had shortages of hardware, and then like pretty much like a lot of Chinese imports hit the market. We're talking like hinges and drawer guides. Like hinges are easy because they'll copy each other, but drawer guides were like, everyone's got subtle
Slightly different.
differences,
Yeah.
they're different locations. And it felt like every week we're creating a new, like, another new version of a dragon magic something pro. Like, they're all these similar names, but there was so many of them hitting the market and getting requests for that. But we were like, okay, like, my experience through Microvellum was like, you can't overcomplicate the software. You need to keep it easy. My experience through Cabinet Vision was we're reinventing the wheel at every customer we went to. We're like, setting these things up, because that was, I guess they were more of a service-driven revenue company, where it was as much about selling service as it was about selling the software. And I really wanted to make sure that, like, the Mozaik experience was like, you're not reinventing the wheel every time. Like, you guys are, you guys build cabinets. We'll put the the drawer guides in the software. Like, we don't expect every customer to do that. And I didn't want to create a business model where we told every customer, okay, if you need that, you buy an hour of training and we do it for you. Like, that's a difficult model to scale, because it's like you're going to have to keep hiring staff to keep providing that service. And it was like, why? Like, when you can have it in the software all ready to go, like, it can just be in there. Like, there's, you got to question whether that is the way you want to set your business up. And for me, it was definitely not. I wanted, less people, less headaches, and just have things as freely available as they could be. Like, let's focus on selling software, not service. That was
Let
my
me,
mindset.
that's a really interesting perspective, because when I, became aware of you and met you, and then ultimately, our user group here, our user Facebook group here in America really kicked off and took off with Jason and I. And it was always the one big thing I noticed was that you were doing a lot of this stuff for your market, right? Guides, libraries, all of these things. Bloom would come out with a new product, and I'd say, okay, someone would say, hey, David, how long until this is ready, or something like that. And that's not what was happening in America, right?
Yep.
We weren't getting those types of things. And it's not really a question about why. My question is, do you feel like your user base, do you feel like they're in a better place when everything is done for them right out of the get-go and they can get into it easier? Or do you feel like they fall behind a little because they never had to figure anything out, and it was all, and like the second they're faced with like their first, this isn't an out-of-the-box solution. Oh my God, what do I do?
Yeah.
Do you see a difference between like the American customer base because of that and yours? I don't really know what the question is. Do you know where I'm going with that?
I know
You
where
know
you're
what I
going.
mean?
Yeah. I feel like you walk a very fine line, like you really do. And it's like, I think as soon as someone hits adversity, like through like, not knowing how to do something, like in our market, thankfully they do reach out. Like, we do get the emails, and, I don't know, there's no kind of like, there was a lot that we did differently. And like, to the point of like, if somebody sends in our Australian team an email, they submit their job, or they send an email asking a question, like, we send back a video response via Loom. Like, we download their, what their system, we have it set up on our end, and then we walk them through a 5-10 minute video. And that's a win for everyone. It's a win for the customer because they get a personalized narrated video on like how to do something. It's like, a snippet of training. And it's a win for us because it's faster than typing out an email and taking screenshots and half an hour on
Well,
a
and my guess is it cuts down on the back and forth, right? The replies and the reply backs, and
people, we realized pretty early on. Well, we've tried various different systems over the years, but we realized pretty early on that people wanted to save those things. They wanted to go back to those videos, and and that stopped a lot of repeat questions. It stopped a lot of people coming back to us, going like, because I remembered there was a video from last time, searched through emails, and then I was like, man, there's something to this, like it's crazy to have the same conversation multiple times with every customer. Right. I was pretty focused on building systems where we could scale the support and get that. But circling back to your question on like, the setup and how much do you give somebody as like a out of the box plug and play solution versus not, like it's a real difficult balance to get that right. Like, especially when you frame that with, we're selling a 3-month trial. So you've got like 90 days to feel like
that's true.
You can learn this thing and you can move forward with it. So, my mindset was like, I guess, if people could in that 90 days feel like they could see the software could do enough, they could see the options were there, but maybe it's more of a limitation of like, I don't know yet how to use that, or I don't know yet how to get advantage of that. I feel like that was a situation where people would more likely renew than you flipping it and going, I'm going to give you bare minimum and you need to train and learn that. That approach might give you a more long-term customer if they do renew. But I feel like you flirt the line of like, will they renew because you're not giving them enough out of the box? And
that's a good point.
And I don't think that's ever been by design. I feel like it's always a restraint of like, the amount of resources available, like Mozaik's grown so quickly over the years to a point where it's like difficult to scale your team to keep up with that growth. And not often, like just adding more people doesn't often fix the problem. You know what I mean? Like I got to add the right people, and if you just throw another 10 people at it, you're probably not going to be any closer to solving your problems. You're probably going to have a whole new subset of problems. So it's kind of like it's a difficult problem to solve. And I feel like I had the beauty of hindsight from my previous ventures. I had the opportunity to set it up differently here, like in this market, and kind of start like, so it was kind of like I don't know, like a fortunate situation to walk into, to go like, how would I want it to work? And, not having to like carry forward the way something was working already. And I think that's like, difficult thing. But
well, I'll tell you what, man, you already know how I feel about you, but if anybody in any software, cabinet or otherwise, wants the starting point and to like what you did with Cadmate, I mean, I hope you could look back and say, man, I wouldn't do that much different. Maybe little things. It totally worked. The vision worked. Customer base is as happy as any customer base I've seen.
Yeah.
So I hope you're proud of that, man, because it's pretty amazing.
That, man. I appreciate that. It's like I don't know. I feel fortunate that I landed with the right software option as well. Like, Mozaik, and like timing's everything, right? Like Mozaik's was going through like such a, so many leaps and bounds of like, where it was at from when I joined in 2020 to where it's at today. It's like, it's almost unrecognizable. And it's like, I hope that in the next 5 years, we'll get to that same point again. And it's like, and I'm confident we will, because I know the people and that are behind it. And that's the one thing for me that I was like, it motivated me more when I realized how fast this was moving on. Because I said to you, like, and that was always my frustration of like, I wanted to move fast, and I felt like I was partnered with something that wasn't moving fast enough. And when I realized that like Mozaik was moving at a pace, I was like, oh, this is good. Like, let's go, we can do this. And
it makes you want to just pour gasoline on it, doesn't it?
It gave me the confidence to do that. Like to like I said to you, to set the business up to scale, to like set it up in a way that I could scale. I had the confidence because I knew that I was behind the right product. And I just wanted to pour gasoline on it 100%. I was like, let's go, like there's no holding this thing back. I'm all in, like, let's, and there's probably not much I would do differently. I mean, there's always going to be small things. And, I think if there's not, then you're probably doing other things wrong because, the beauty of
you can't argue with the results though, man. I mean, that's
I appreciate
awesome.
that, man. It's it's been a ride, that's for sure. So
so it's such a short one, and I can't help but just think of all the parallels to you and I in a totally different way. But man, it's just been the last 4 or 5 years have been pretty wild.
Say that again, for sure.
So tell me a little bit about so there basically have been 2 big acquisitions in your life in the last couple of years. Cyncly purchasing Mozaik itself, and then ultimately Cadmate too.
Yeah.
When did you know the Mozaik acquisition was coming? How much of a heads up did you have compared to the rest of the world?
So that played out at the 2022 Atlanta show, right? I didn't know at the time. I got a text message from Roger. I was pretty jet lagged. I got home like I was a day or two after I got home from the show, and I got a text message from Roger, middle of the night, said, something like, "Hey, buddy, have you got a minute?" And I was like, "Yeah." Gave him a call, and he broke the news that he had sold the company, and I was like, "Wow, okay." Did not see this coming. Like,
Yep.
it was
So that
I
was
was
right after the show.
right after the show. Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Um, and I think probably the only person that really knew at the show would have been Michael.
Yep.
And this all kind of played out pretty quickly throughout the show. And I think Roger mentions that like a lot of the big events in his life have been circulated around trade shows. It seems to happen that way. But yeah,
Yep.
I guess I was immediately concerned as I'd built this thing, but I
Hmm.
had no written agreement, no actual contract other than a handshake agreement. But Roger, true to his word, said, "Look, I've explained the situation. I've explained to these guys that you're a key piece of this, and they need to write that agreement up pretty quick and
Yep.
bring you into it, and formalize everything." So I was appreciative that he like stuck to his word like right
Yeah.
through, and
Went to bat for you. That's huge.
went to bat for me. Where to him at that point, like he didn't need to. That wasn't. But no, like I said, I've like my read on him from day one was he's a genuine person, true to his word, and his word meant to him more to him than any piece of paper. And
Yeah.
that's been nothing but true for me in my experience. So,
Yeah. That's awesome.
um,
So when was that sync? When did it actually go public? Was that a month or two later?
yeah, like basically, obviously, CompuSoft in 2020, merged forces and rebranded as
Yeah.
Cyncly, and I think that was like, I think Michael was like the first kind of like technical like employee for Cyncly. Like it was like as under the new structure on, that
I
signed
see.
the new
Yeah.
agreement, and I wasn't too
Yeah.
far behind him. And basically, it was like, we had different in a different sense because I was signing a reseller agreement,
Right.
not
Right.
an
Right. Right.
employment agreement, right? It's a little bit different, but I guess I probably would have been the first reseller agreement under the Cyncly banner. So
Yeah.
yeah, but yeah, that was around September 2022.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
then, we've gone through, okay, this is going to change. What's this going to look like? I'd built a good like rapport with Michael, and he and I got along really well. And he'd made it pretty clear early on that like, hey, let's do this together. Like, let's go through.
Yep.
He wanted my input on like how things were happening over here, understanding that a lot of the intention of acquiring Mozaik was based around growing this thing globally.
Right.
Taking a product from one market and repeating that success around the world.
Yep.
So
Well, yeah. You don't acquire to stay stagnant. That's for sure.
no, that's right. And
Yep.
I think so. Michael really appreciated that. Like I had a different, I guess, view of things because I'm looking at it from a making it work for a different market. So
Yep.
Michael was obviously like all over the North American market and understood all of that, but really kind of like was able to leverage my insights for the more of a global perspective. So yeah, it moved forward under that new venture and worked really well.
Hmm.
For a while, and then yeah, basically from there the second part of that was like I think it was the Atlanta show in 2024. So again,
Yep.
kind of like another things happen around trade shows, but
Yeah.
I'd met with the acquisition team at Cyncly, and we just had a casual conversation about like, would you be
Did you
open?
initiate that, or did they come to you?
No, they came to me. Michael kind of felt me out and said like, hey, like, would you be open to, talking about bringing this into the group and, selling the company and joining forces? And I was like, look, always open to a conversation, always open to an
Of course.
opportunity.
Yep.
Learn enough over my life to know that like you're not going to have a closed mindset with anything. I just said, I don't want to put myself in a situation where if we get so far down a conversation and it's not the outcome that I want, or it's not kind of where I want to go, that I'm not burning any bridges, or I'm not, setting
Yep.
myself up for the wrong outcome. And everyone was great with that. It was like, no, let's just have a real conversation. Let's talk about like what it could look like. What are the pros and cons, and we kind of worked through that. It it played out like over pretty much, I don't know, somewhere between like 6 months or so. Like it took about 6 months to kind of play out from when that first conversation happened.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, and it was, you're torn, right? Because for me, it was like the opportunity to help do what I've done in Australia and do that everywhere in the world. I'm like, well, that really interested me. I'm like, okay,
Yep.
I can help more people. And that was the first thing. I'm like, okay, everything else aside, like the very biggest motivator for me was I can reach more people. I can help more people. I
Yep.
can save more people from, to put context to that. There's one thing that I like, I genuinely hate. And it's like, it's weird because it's like you make a lot of sales this way, but like I get phone calls every week from cabinet makers that are like, they've been burnt in one way or another from software. It's like, hey,
Hmm.
there was a couple of years ago there was a big flood event in Australia, and like, a lot of Australia was damaged by floods. We had I had a lot of people that lost software dongles, in those floods. And just, man, like it
Don't
killed
tell me
me.
they had to buy them back.
Oh yeah. Yeah, you're a new customer at that point. You got to buy that. You got to buy that thing again. And no one's covered from flood. No, insurance does not cover you from floods. If most people in these areas, they're in floodplains, they're not going to
Yep.
get insured for a flood event.
Yep.
And for a software company to turn around and tell people to buy that again, like when you've done business with these guys for some of them 10, 20 years, man. I mean, you know
Yep.
they're a customer, they're legitimate
Yep.
people. That I hate that, man. I hate, and honestly, like
It's terrible.
it's a phone call where it's the easiest sale you're ever going to get because people are burnt, people are
Yep.
frustrated, and but
Especially in
it's not the
software
sale
where,
you want. It's not how you want to win a sale. It's not how I want
right.
to win a sale. It's like it kills me, man. And
Yeah, that's rough.
it's that element of it that I'm like, I knew if I make this change and like I move into this role where I can help reach more people, I can save more people like that from that situation. And that was my
Yep.
motivation for it. It was like
Yep.
helping, reaching more people and connecting with more people. I don't know, that's to me, that was like, okay, that's the number one thing. I'm like, if we can do that, then I'm all ears. Let's talk about how it could look. And my biggest concern and hesitation with all of it was, you know, it built a reputation with Cadmate throughout the industry over here. And I was like, how do I navigate that? How do I navigate, like, we're all part of Mozaik now, we're all one team, we're all part of Cyncly, we're one company, we're one team. But I don't want customers to feel like they're losing what we created, what they've come to know and like about, the the experience with Cadmate, with Mozaik, with all of it. So I was like, that's the struggle. It's the same people, and it's communicated that in a way of like, it's the same people, it's the same team, it's the same experience. It's just in a different,
Yep.
under different ownership, under a different entity. But that's a delicate balance, and we're still navigating through that, like, because it's still like we're technically still Cadmate, but we are, we're all
Yep.
part of the same team, and like
Well, it's
moving
still
forward,
pretty fresh, right? Because this was 6 months ago.
yeah, yeah,
So
7 months ago,
yeah.
yeah, end of last year. So, that's the bit that it's a difficult transition, but you know, no regrets. Like I've been, I guess, exposed to so many different challenges, and going from like a small
Yep.
business owner, being able to think on your feet and adapt on the fly and be
Yep.
agile and control every thing in the way you wanted without answering to anyone, to then being in a more corporate environment where things are
Yep.
more formal and structured, and um, you
Back
know
out of your comfort zone again. Hmm.
but like you're going to want to look back on your life and not and regret, like you don't want to have regrets of not taking opportunities as they come up as well. So I'm like,
That's right.
I looked at it like, hey, in 20, 30 years, if I look back on my career, am I going to be like, you know oh, hey, I wish I never, like, ventured into that corporate entity?
Hmm.
I think you're going to be more inclined to be the opposite of like, oh, I didn't take that opportunity and I'm never going to know what that was like,
That's
so
right.
you got to try things, and you got to understand,
I've
like, you're going to grow
Yep.
from it. I'm going to meet a lot of people along the way, and already have, like, there's so many talented people involved at Cyncly, and like I've learned a lot from a lot of different people, and that's challenged my views on a lot of things as well, which is really cool because,
Mhm.
for every opportunity, you're going to learn something from everyone, and you're going to keep growing. So, you know.
What is your official new title now?
It's head of international growth for Mozaik. So, titles are a tricky thing in Syncly because, like, big company, 2,500 employees around the world, with a lot of different sort of companies within companies, right? So there's a lot
Yep.
of different things. And we wanted to find a way where like I could really the focus on growing Mozaik internationally, but have like enough freedom and flexibility in that title to ensure that I can make a difference, and I'm not kind of like too buried in layers of structure and have to kind of
Yep.
go through too many layers to impact change. And I think like I guess that was probably part of the trickier thing is finding like where I fit into that piece and and how to give me enough rope to to make a difference. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
What I think conversations I've had with you and Michael, it sounds like India is
Yep.
the next frontier, so to say. What challenges do you see coming in markets that you are not
Yeah.
used to
Yeah.
yourself?
I think there's three target regions, like pretty much where we're at play or playing out before I joined, and it's really India, UK, and Mexico.
Okay.
Um, India being kind of the a big part of the focus. We've got a team of three guys over there. And India's a tough market. It's very different. Like you've got a whole different subset of problems to challenges to face, right? Majority industry, like they over there it's like referred to as organized and unorganized. Okay, so
I
it's
see.
like, think of that as like, you're an official shop, or like you're I guess a shop that's like, maybe paid all your insurances and you've got all your, you've got everything legally set up to operate. That's your kind of organized part of the market. And then you've got your unorganized part of the market, which might be just hobbyist, backyard,
Mm-hmm.
operators, guys operating, like that. And 90% of the market over there is unorganized.
I see.
Whereas that's different over everywhere else that we operate,
That's a
right? Like in
lot.
the States, it's you flip those numbers around, like it's a very
Mm-hmm.
different
Yep.
situation. And the organized guys, they're competing with guys that are turning up with a track saw and getting materials delivered to someone's house, and they're just building it in house. They'll be inside your house for 3 months with a track saw, cutting every piece, drilling every hole manually, building this thing, as manual and archaic as you can. But
Crazy.
it's like a fraction of the price, like
Mm-hmm.
it's probably 15 to 20% of the cost of an organized company. So, therein lies the problem. And for us as a software company, well, we need the organized market to grow so we can
Right.
cater software to the organized market. So
Yep.
there's a lot outside of your control. There's a lot outside of your control from the mindset of like, how big. I mean, thankfully the Indian market, there's, 1.4 billion people. So
Right.
it's a big market. Even though you play into maybe 10% of the market, there's still a lot of
It's
operators
a
in that
lot.
market. So
Mm-hmm.
but it's also going through a transition of like, the organized market might be using a table saw and a manual drilling machine to then, going through a transition of, onboarding like nesting machines or point to point machines or vertical drilling machines or whatever it is. But
Yep.
it's an early market. My view is like, it's a market that will grow over time. But there's only so much you can do to reach a market that doesn't yet kind of fully exist. So,
Do you
it's
feel like in some ways it's at the beginning of I mean, obviously not being in North America, but I feel like in 2005, maybe 2010, kind of the start of Roger's vision of every shop's about to have a CNC because they're about to get more affordable and it's about to become easier. And you feel
100%.
like that India's at the beginning of that
I would say so.
in some way?
The biggest question is, will the price, like, will the value of quality outweigh the cost savings of price?
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's a difficult thing to know because culturally, like, there's a big question there. Like I think in Australia and in America, people are going to probably go like, you know what, like I want, maybe it's through advertising and marketing, like, that we've seen all our lives, but you're geared towards wanting the better option or the thing that is going to have a higher quality. So like the quality
Yep.
question comes into it for us. Like, sure, I could save some money, but hey, that might hurt me later on, or it might fall apart, or it might like, might not last, or or it might not be.
Right.
Maybe
But
there's
don't
a
you think with automation, though, that price point between organized and unorganized becomes even closer? And at some point, it starts to outweigh, because that's not uncommon
it
to
has
what
to.
was here, right? There were regions where people were building face frames on site and,
Mm.
and that's still happens kind of in some regions, but it's mostly gone now.
Yeah,
I feel like that's
it has
a
to shift.
similar trajectory, right?
100%. You're right. It has to shift
Yeah.
at some point. It's the question of like how long like does that play out over, and that's the
Yeah.
bit that's difficult to estimate. Like, does it happen over the next 2 or 3 years? Is it more of like a 5 to 10 year kind of timeline? You know, but I will say like from like a trade show a year ago to a trade show this year, like, there was like one or two nesting machines on the floor of a trade show 2 years ago. And then, this year, like almost every company has a nesting machine on
I
display.
see.
So like we're
So
seeing
you can already see it
beginning,
started.
you can see the beginning of that, but it's at a stage yet where I don't think people are fully understanding the advantages of that emerging nesting market, and it'll
Yep.
happen. It'll happen. Like we've seen it around the world play out like that.
Yep.
Eventually, the companies that are adopted early enough are the ones that kind of put the pressure on everyone else to shift that way, because then they
Hmm.
start producing things quicker and more affordable, and
That's right.
the whole thing snowballs. But yeah, it'll play out over time. But yeah, India's an interesting. And again, they build things differently. There's different construction styles. They have these things called civil kitchens, where like um, they cook with a lot of aromas, and they need to make sure airflow goes through the cabinet. So like there's just a whole different approach again to the
Yeah.
way things are done. And as a software company, then we need to adapt and support that too. So
Interesting.
yeah,
Um, let's pivot a little bit. Let's talk V14 for a second.
cool.
Um, so you released V14 as what you called an open beta this time around.
Yep.
Um, what went into that decision? Why do it that way versus a closed beta and a release? What was the thinking behind that?
Well, we still did a closed beta as well.
Hmm.
So we had a closed beta for a number of weeks. Our fear was that we changed materials with version 14 throughout the years. You change different things, and you kind of have a bit of a feel of like how many people is this potentially going to impact. So, like you could do some real basic numbers and go like, okay, version 13 we changed a lot in the optimizer. Okay, so it was like, well, if half your customers are using the optimizer and half aren't, well then you straight away you're not affecting half of the customers. So
Right.
you always like, I guess, looking at things statistically and go, okay, well, when we change materials, well, now we've impacted every single customer, like potentially. Okay, so there's
Right.
a problem, you're going to affect everyone.
Mm.
And that didn't sit well, with us thinking, okay, well, we had changed so much in materials that the concern was like, we don't know what we don't know. And,
Right.
we don't know, we felt like we hadn't had a wide enough spectrum of different people using it in different ways within
Yeah.
that closed beta. I think there was about 200 in the closed beta, and it was like, you know, it just felt like we were concerned that once this went to a wider group, there would be more impacts, rolling out
Yeah.
from it. So it was like, okay, let's. And Michael came up with the idea of the open beta from the perspective of like, let's let people know it's available. Like, should they want to, download it and move forward with it? Hindsight's easy. I feel like, we've learned from there that we probably need to do a better job of explaining even like what beta means. Like, again, like
Yeah.
we're in a software world, our customers aren't, so that's fair. And a lot of people probably downloaded it. Again, we did something completely different to what we'd done previously, and we
Yeah.
probably could have done a better job of communicating that, as well, just to let people know, there are risks involved in going to a beta
Absolutely.
release,
Yeah.
right? But
Yeah.
that was the thinking. It was more or less like let's, hopefully we'll, in our mindset it was like, let's hopefully go from 200 to 500 to 1,000 to 2,000. Like let's gradually see the increase, and then we'll be in a position to like quickly fix what comes in,
Yeah.
quickly. Whereas if you roll something out as a general release, it's kind of you're giving it your stamp of like, this is ready to go.
Right.
You're gung ho into production, like you're good to go.
Yep.
And it just we knew it would snowball, but we kind of didn't know, where the challenges were going to be, because there was too many areas that were affected by materials to know,
Yep.
and that was really where it came from.
Were there
And
any that came up that you can share that kind of shocked you that you would have never seen coming?
I don't know that there's anything that comes to mind of like, that I think there was things that you would like, if we had more time, or if like in hindsight, we probably would have done a few things differently.
Yep.
But I don't know. Actually, probably the one that stands out to me would be that there was a really random bug, and it was kind of like it was a pretty like bad situation. It was like if someone had installed version 14 on like 3 of their 4 computers and they've got like file sharing set up and they're on all, all 4, and they open Mozaik on version 13 on the 4th computer that they hadn't yet updated, it's going to like wipe the materials across the board.
I
And we
see.
saw that play out, and we had like a lot of, help desk tickets of people going like, I've like lost all my materials. Like, how do I get them back? And that was pretty widespread. And we'd never seen that one coming, because it was like you had to have that exact scenario set up, that you had like you only updated 3 of the 4, and then you
Yep.
tried to open a job that was created in 14 but on version 13, and then like that was like there's things like that you just you do all your testing, but it's hard to replicate. It's hard to
Hmm.
replicate those scenarios and think like, and
And
you
and
tend
in
to sit there and
hindsight, it's easy to say, "Oh yeah,
yeah.
we should have seen this or caught that or this or that." But I don't think people
Yeah.
realize how many millions of combinations of
Yeah.
what customers have, what they do, and it's
100%. Like
impossible to see them all, man.
it is, and we've got like, we've got automated test cycles. Like, when we make a new build, it goes through an automated test cycle that, basically goes through all these different functions, and it runs like a test bed and tells us if it fails or passes. So like we've got automation there to like test anything well before it goes even to
Sure.
any internal person to test. And then it goes to the internal team and we test that and we look at that. It's really hard though, like, to see it. Like, you're so invested and you're in it every day that it's so hard to see it from a completely different perspective. Like,
100%.
it's really hard to step so far back. And trade shows are great for that. Like, we love going to the shows we get that elevated perspective at a trade show. You have people from all around the country come up to you and like tell you like, how they're using it, what's working for them, what's not working for them. And
Yeah.
there's such a great like, feedback loop for us to like
Hmm.
understand. So, but yeah, it's there's those ones that you think, oh, and you think, oh, why didn't you just update all 4 computers? But at the same time, it's kind of like, on the flip side, hey, why didn't we do a better job to make sure that you have to update all of them? Like,
Right.
maybe it shouldn't even open on the 4th one of it. Like, so that it goes both ways, and that's
Absolutely.
I don't know. My experience over the years is like there's always going to be a challenge with any software. There's always going to be things that work and don't work. There's always going to be new bugs. But
Yep.
I think what frustrates people more is like not owning it. You know what I mean? Like, I'm
Of
like,
course.
that's the bit that I do appreciate about the Mozaik way. It's like, it's all pretty public. Like, we put these things on the forum, they get shared on Facebook. There's like,
Well, that's what I was going to ask you about. The open beta basically played out in public, right? We got to
yeah,
see all of these things happen in real time. Do you feel like, do you like that? Personally, do you feel like you'll do more open betas?
I
Are there
think so.
negatives to it playing out so publicly?
There is like, the negatives are always going to be like, perception of like, you're concerned of like, how many people will and won't update. At AWFS
Mhm.
last week, I had a customer come up to me and say like, hey, we're just letting you know we're switching to something else. Like, we're here to buy other software. We've had Mozaik for 5 years and we're not happy. And I like thankful that they gave us the opportunity to even have a conversation to begin with.
Yeah.
And through talking to them and like working through their list of like all the things that they were unhappy about, eventually it was kind of like, do you know what version you're on? And they're like, no idea. Like, how do we know? And we'd end up calling their factory and getting them to like open the software and go to helping about and suss it out. And it was version 9. Like, they hadn't updated since 2020. And I was like,
I
that's
see.
right when I joined. So I'm like, I know how many things have changed in that
Yeah.
time. And I'm like,
How many things on their list had been?
the entire list, 3 pages, had been fixed. Like, there's not one outstanding
Yep.
thing at the end of that. And I'm like, but from both sides, like there's things that we need to do to like, make it. And we've got changes coming where, we're going to be able to communicate that updates better to
Yep.
people in app to let people know like that
I see.
updates are available. But
Yep.
we've got to, you've got to build confidence in the update. And I think transparency, my view is like you can never go too wrong by being transparent with people. Like,
Yes.
if you approach it with the mindset of like, we're gonna hold it back, hold it back, hold it back, and then tell you it's 100% ready, because you're never gonna know when it's 100% ready, even when you think it is. you can't go from like a couple hundred people testing something, even 1,000 people, to 10,000 companies and
Nope.
expect everything to have caught everything. It's never going to happen. So I feel like, well, let's be real about that. Let's be transparent. Let's call it like what it is and go like let more people move to it over time. And when you're comfortable, the fear is like will enough people do it then? Because it's like if it's open, will a lot of people just hold back and wait? Hopefully, you're adding enough value in those features to give people a good enough reason to do so.
Yep.
And in the wording of that, like we would never release software like that's not ready to go to market. Like we still felt like this was ready for market. It's just we changed what it was called to let people know that like there's more risk involved in this one, I think.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I feel like even with or without the risk, we'll probably still move forward with that open beta cycle with any
Idea.
major release, right?
Yeah.
It probably isn't necessary with minor releases, but with major releases, like it makes sense. It gives you an opportunity to test the waters and continually improve things. And there's people that run like some pretty crazy production shifts that they're super impacted by anything that goes wrong, right? And you're like, well,
Mhm.
maybe you need like that's a customer that probably needs to wait until 5,000 other people have tested the waters, right?
I agree, right? People that have that much at stake, maybe open
Yeah.
beta 1 is not the right time
Yeah. And
for you.
then,
Yeah.
and like it plays into the whole thing we're talking about with the community of going like, I feel like you'll know through the weight of the community of like how many people are actually then still
Mhm.
running the production and at what point, I think we felt like we knew at what point, like through the community feedback, that the beta was, from a public perception ready to go as well.
Yep.
So that was nice from our perspective of like we could see the tickets slowing down, we could see the feedback requests slowing down. We've kept iterating and fixing those things. So it's like you're seeing that, but you're also seeing the comments on Facebook change and people the more positive impact of 14 and that's I guess your concern with that playing out public is like does it detract from the all the new features and the new things that you've done and like all the the benefits of version 14 versus like is there an overarching like concern over whether it's ready to go and like does that detract from but like I don't want a situation where you've got people like these guys like that haven't updated for 5 years because they read one Facebook comment about an
Right.
update broke a job and this didn't work and it's like that happens a lot that happens a crazy amount
Yeah. Yep.
but you can try and like prevent that from happening and hide from it or you can lean into it and I'm like well, my mindset is like well like let's lean into it let's be as
Yep.
open and transparent as we can be let's let people
Yep. I think that's the only way. Like in the face of, I can think of some like, just dumb comments in the past. In my opinion, like 2 people would have label issues in a day, and then all of a sudden someone thinks that Mozaik has label printing issues. Well, how about the 10,000 people that print labels every day?
yeah
Right? Social media has this way of amplifying
yeah it does
insanely minor things,
yeah
and
yeah.
so
But
yeah,
it can
I know
work the
what
other
you
way
mean.
too, thankfully. Like, sometimes people get on there and they'll say something pretty controversial or, like that. They'll point out something and then, the weight of like 50 other comments of people explaining that that's not how it works for them or like,
Hmm.
you'll have people jump in and say like, hey, you should buy some training because you'll be able to
Yep.
get all this dialed in pretty quick. And so it can work both ways. Like it can
For sure.
amplify problems, but it can also help like, guide people into maybe like through the weight of other people like as a software provider like you can go like and say okay like and you're conscious of not wanting to ever be like oh this is you just don't know enough about the software like you don't want to
Right.
kind of be that person that's
It's a
like
hard. It's
hey
a hard line. Hmm.
it's a hard line right but like I think coming from a peer in the industry where it's another person that's using Mozaik or it's like it's a customer it's a I feel like as a peer-to-peer thing like you're more likely to hear that you're more likely
You
to
are.
hear like hey I had
Yeah.
the same problem and I got training and now it's fixed like
Yep.
or whatever it is
And the
uh,
peers, they start to get to know each other. They don't have to be as delicate,
yeah
uh, and once there's kind of a friendly rapport, if they feel like they need to just say something to their Facebook friend, they just say it.
yeah
And I think that's a really important piece too.
that's the bit that I've loved watch playing out over the last like 4 or 5 years is that everyone kind of used to have the mindset of like trade secrets. I'm not going to tell anyone how I'm doing things or why I'm doing them, or like, I'm
It's
going to,
so dead now.
it's so dead now. I love that.
Yeah,
It's like
I do
people are,
too.
and you see it, like people are, like at AWFS last week, like, amount of people that are like sharing information freely between each other and helping each other out. I mean, it's a beautiful thing. And like,
It's the
we're,
best.
business can be pretty lonely,
Hmm.
because if you feel like it's weird because you feel like you're blazing trails and you're doing like, everything for the first time, and it shouldn't feel like that way because
Right.
there are so many other people in the same boat. And I don't know,
Yep.
there's so much comfort that comes from connecting with those people and knowing that,
It is.
I
I think
mean,
that's the biggest thing to me about those groups is, you got some guy who has 4 employees in a pole barn in his backyard in Louisiana,
yeah,
and he's like thinks he's alone, and but what he doesn't realize is there's literally 20,000 other people just like that
yeah,
in America or Australia, wherever. And once you see that and you become a part of that, man, it is an addicting thing to want to be a part of, and you feel like
yeah.
you're not alone anymore. It's a good way to put it. Hmm.
It's huge. And I
Yeah,
mean, hey, I'd like if there's any other like kind of head of international growth people out there listening to this, like reach out. And just,
yeah,
I'd love to. I'd
you've got
love
quite the
to.
niche now, man. You're pretty. You're
I
gonna be
would love to
lonely for a
talk to
little
other
bit.
people that are trying to, because you're navigating like challenges that I've never been faced with. I'm like, how to like a real thing that I'm trying to weigh up right now is like moving forward with how we advertise Mosaic on social media, right? We're
Hmm.
we're over the next few years we're going to be in a real interesting situation of like we're going to have translations in Mosaic and be able to cater to new markets, right, that are not English speaking. And what that means is like how do you market and advertise your products? Like, do you have a separate, do you have an Italian and a German and a Spanish
Hmm.
version of your Instagram pages that are, or do you try and tie it all into one? How do you connect with everyone? How do you resonate with everyone in all different markets that are
Yep.
speaking different languages that have maybe different problems? So there's
Those
a
are
lot
big
that goes into
questions.
thinking about that, and I don't
Yep.
have the
Yep.
answers for it yet. But I'm trying to navigate through that to figure out what's the right way to do it. How
You'll
to
you'll figure that out.
it's but that's part of the fun challenge. So
Yep.
yeah,
Let's this has been amazing. I want to end here with maybe some that are a little more lighthearted, a little fun.
cool.
Um, Face frame cabinets are not a thing in Australia. Uh, what is your reaction, or what was your early reaction when you realized that North America was building like that? I
Man,
have to know what your
I
thoughts
like
were.
I came over to that 2022 Atlanta show, and Atlanta probably more so, surrounded by a face frame area, so I've
Hmm.
since learned, right?
Yep.
And I felt like that stage I'd used Mosaic for a couple of years. I felt like I'd got it pretty dialed and I was pretty comfortable. But man, I was like a fish out of water, like thrown into that market. Like talking to people, like again, the imperial system, I understand it, but it's not second nature for me. So when someone comes up
Right.
to you and is talking about like how to rebate or rabbit a face frame onto the cabinet, and they want like a 30-second overhang here, or like
Yep.
just a 16th here, and I'm just like, man, I can't visualize these like these amounts. Like I can't see in my mind what that looks like. And that was a challenge, and it was eye-opening for me. And I'm just thinking, man, like in Australia, like everyone builds a box differently, but it's still just a box, right? And it's like when you add the complexity of the frame, I was just like, wow, like you guys have got it. Like I said to all the trainers, like you guys have got it way harder than like this
Hmm.
adds like so much damn complexity to the whole thing. And
It does.
kind of surprising, like like I had installed a lot of kitchens like in my time as a cabinet maker, and I'd ripped out a lot of face frame kitchens like from
Oh, really?
yeah, like basically I my only exposure to face frame was demolition, because it was like
I see.
you know that's how things were done probably in the 60s, 70s, 80s, like
Yep. I'm
um
guessing prior to edge banding machines becoming
yeah.
commonplace.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. And
Interesting.
so I demolitioned a few of them, but never built one. And I guess I don't know. It was like so eye opener to me of like, I felt like the American market was very much like we've always done it this way, and we're always going to do it this way, and we're not going to change. Like there's a like
Hmm.
a very much like, well, my granddad did it this way, and this is how I'm doing it, and like and yeah, there's I it's funny, because like I look at the American market with two completely like contrasting views. I look at it as, in one way, I feel like America builds a much higher quality standard of final product than
Really?
anywhere else I see in the world. From the
Really?
perspective of like, the craft and the craft that goes into it, and like the final product, and like even the materials that are used, and just all aspects of that, I feel like it's a superior product. It's a better product. It's going to last you a longer time. But at the same time, I feel like America is like so far behind the rest of the world in automation, in
Yeah.
building something that will make you money, that where you can scale, that like that there's a balance between the two. And I feel like America's in this, like it's a beautiful craft. It's like you're building a better product, but you're
Yeah.
doing it in a way that's going to be hard to make money. It's going to be hard to scale. It's going to be hard to grow. It's going to be, you add
Yeah.
in way more complexity, way more challenges. And the rest of the world is like, probably gone too far the other way of building things too cheap, and building
I
things
see.
like to a, they've leaned too far into the automation, that there's somewhere in the middle there that, like, I don't know, from like traveling all around the world, my perception is like New Zealand has it right. They've landed somewhere in between the two. They're still using high enough quality materials. Like, they're a pretty, a small place, but I feel like, I don't know, that to me, they've found some sort of middle ground between the two, and that's
You
like,
didn't just alienate your Aussies with that comment, did you?
oh, maybe, but like I said, you can
No,
never be
I'm
wrong
kidding.
for speaking your truth. And I
That's
don't know,
right.
like, I mean, there's people here that build amazing things. There's no doubt, but like at
Yeah,
the
yeah.
grand
I know
scale,
exactly
like,
what you mean.
the grand scale is like, we, the rest of the world probably looks at Australia and thinks we built a lot of whiteboard boxes. We built a lot of cheap,
Yep.
chipboard, whiteboard boxes. As for a lot of companies, it's like printing money, right? They
Hmm.
do well out of that, but there is like that lack of craft to it to a certain degree as well. But you know,
It's business. It's business,
it's
man.
business. It's business. You gotta
That's
question
right.
what you're doing. But yeah, it was a shock to the system. I always
I'm
joke,
sure.
like, one of the other trainers, Matt Wallace.
Yep.
I
Shout out, Matt.
yeah, 100%. Like, I was at a trade show, and I had like, a guy that was like he taught, he was a teacher. He taught like face frame building, like face frame cabinetry at a education institution for years. And he came up and he was like getting a demo from me from Mozaik, and like, I'm like the wrong person to be demoing face frames to you, man. But
Yeah.
I'm gonna try, and like, I got like right through majority of, like, sort of stumbled my way through it. And then there was one thing that completely stumped me, and I turned to Matt. I'm like, hey man, can you help me out here? And Matt to this day says, I taught Dave everything I know about face frame. And it's true. But
I
you
love it.
know, so yeah, fish out of the water for sure. But it's
Yeah. Let's end on this one. I know V14 just came out, but I'm gonna ask a V15 question.
Yep.
Uh, what can you share about what's coming? And AI is the new buzz, right?
Yeah.
Everybody's wondering how this is going to impact
Yeah.
businesses, software, everything.
Yeah.
How does that tie into the future and
Yeah. I mean,
what's
there's a
coming?
lot. There's a lot we can do, and obviously, I've got to be cautious of, like,
Of
how
course.
I'm sure we're going to have competitors listening to this, so I've got to be cautious of not
Hmm.
giving people too much leeway. But I certainly think, like, for us, it's been a long time since Mozaic's been through a visual update. Visually, it's looked the same for a while, and a lot of, like, when we go to do things, like, we might have a great idea on how to implement a new feature, but we get hamstrung by the ability of the UI platform that we're using, in
Yeah.
the background, right? So we have to go through like a transition where we're updating that technology to be able to put ourselves in a position to then take a leap forward, not just in the look and feel, but in what we have, like the capacity of how we can lay out a screen to then give us like screen real estate to actually implement new features. Because sometimes
Yep.
you go, we can do that. There's actually nowhere to put that button. We're
Right.
like,
Where's that button going to go? Yeah.
there's nowhere on the screen. There's nothing we can reshuffle. And it's weird to say that, right? Because, and I thought this as a user, I'm like, you just put it right there, like, right. But then what you never realize when you use Mozaik is, like, we've got to support like a minimum screen size for like CNC machines and like older
Sure.
technology. At some point, you got to kind of like, you do need to move forward, but you don't want to cut off a big portion of the market too. So you don't want to force people to have a new computer either. So you're trying to delicate balance between the two. But definitely, like, a big part of V15 will be updating the technology to allow us to have a better look and feel and really play around with the screen real estate. There's a lot we can do there, and we're pretty excited about like some ideas of how that might play out.
Mhm.
from my perspective, like that also ties into then being able to translate Mozaik into new languages, which means
I
it gives us the capacity to move into new markets, markets that need to be Spanish speaking or need to be, whatever language it is around the world. Like it will make it easier for customers to learn Mozaik if it can be in their native language. So, that's a portion of it. We always try and put something in there for everyone. So there'll definitely be other areas that we try and improve as well. It'd be hard to say what they are because they will kind of get towards the end of this like development cycle and see what we have time for. So we've got a list of all the different things of what we could do, but then you go through and you go, if we have 6 weeks remaining before our target release date, we can do this. If we end up with 4, then we might go this direction.
see.
So,
So it's somewhat a
one of the-
moving target as you approach.
it is like you want to
Yeah.
kind of get it to, this is ideally what you would like to release, but there's always a balance between, when you want to have something released by and how much time you have to do it. And it's a moving target for sure. And the more you kind of, I guess what we learned too from version 14, the more you publicly explain what you're going to do, the more you make it hard for yourself to pivot and change direction as well. So
Yeah.
you set an expectation of like, hey, we're doing this and we're going to have it out by then.
Yep.
And then you get to the point of like, well, if we just had another 3 or 4 weeks, we would probably add this extra thing in, and that might add so much more value.
Yep.
There's that element of it for sure. But yeah, definitely a new look and feel, an improved UI, improving experience, really, and that gives us an opportunity to shore up a lot of things of like making sure there's consistency throughout, like that where you're expecting the button to be is the same in every situation of like where you might use that feature. So,
Yep.
consistency, muscle memory is a big thing. Conscious of not wanting to change too much that people feel like they need
I was
to
going to
relearn
say
the
some
software.
long-term users are going to have to rewire the brain.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
There's
But
an
it's for the best.
that's fearful, but you do have to move forward at some point. But
Yep.
and then from an AI perspective, certainly like there's a lot we can do on the service side of the business for that. I think, we have access to, an incredible amount of data. Like, we can mine a lot of data between, help desk tickets and everything. There's all these touch points that we have of where people are asking questions. And to my point earlier, it's like, it's crazy, man. Like, we can leverage that model to get information in people's hands quicker. That I want a situation in a year's time where it doesn't matter if it's 9 o'clock on a Friday night or it's the middle of Sunday. Like someone can ask a question and have access to all the information, every question that's been asked before, and then present that to them in a understandable format that can step them through a solution. Like, and there is no reason why that should not be feasible. Like,
that would be amazing.
The right tools.
Yep. And just think, even after that launch, just think of how fast that thing would learn too. My gosh,
100%.
I mean, it would stay so current.
Yeah, 100%. It's
that's awesome.
And like, no matter how good you are, right? Like, people ask you questions, and you're like, I know I've had that problem before, and maybe the best people kind of can remember that they've had that problem before, but you still need to go back and look it up and find the email string or something, and then it might take you an hour, and then you get your head back in it, and you remember, okay, that's what the outcome was, and you can solve that problem. AI can do that in 2 seconds.
Oh yeah.
It's like,
and stay current while doing it. That's the thing. I always think about like videos I've made, videos you've made, whatever, like all of this stuff. It's like 2 versions later and it's somewhat out, it's not up to date anymore.
Yeah.
And,
and
that would be an amazing tool.
Yeah. And it can put it in the language that you want to hear it in. It can guide you through it as the way you need to hear it, like, it can step you through it step by step, like, and pretty crazy some of the stuff we've played around with already, like, just how to change a toe kick height. It's like, okay, like, step by step instructions of like walk you through that process, like from the very basic level to then, the high end detailed, like obscure, scenes post issue, right? But it's
right.
Yeah.
Well, and even just like insane part level modification, if you absolutely had to do it, like there's no reason it couldn't do all of that.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So yeah, there's a lot like that we can do, and we're at a pretty pivotal moment. I think, like in the scheme of technology, like you think about like the last 20 years, like we're at a point with AI now where it's like things are going to change so quickly over the next 5 years.
My gosh.
The next 5 years is equivalent to like the previous 20 in terms of like Yeah.
I already felt that way yesterday while I was driving. I listened to Sam Altman, the OpenAI guy, on Phil Vaughn's podcast. Man, do I feel like I feel like my opinion has changed yet again. Like, it's not only like here now, it's gonna be it's just so much quicker than we thought it was coming. It's unreal. And some of the things he brought up are just like exciting and scary. And he even uses those terms, right? The CEO of OpenAI. And I just, man, it's we're headed for an interesting landscape. That's for sure.
I feel like the protection for our customers has to be like the one bit that I think AI is, it's going to take the longest to get right is like doing something with your hands, you know, like actually like, you know, people like plumbers, you know, cabinet makers as well, like anything where it's like, you know, you're doing something with your hands and it takes like that haptic feedback of, you know, pressure and understanding, like, I don't know, there's that element to it. That's going to be the last thing that like an AI can replace. So,
for sure.
You know, but certainly like, I think anyone that's operating the business today and is not thinking about like how to leverage AI in the business, you're already behind. Like you've got to like, you know, you've got to find a way to leverage it and, you know, and implement that into your workflow, because man, it's crazy what you can do. So,
and I'll be honest, I didn't know it at the time, but I'm very glad that I transitioned into a physical product, because knowledge-based things and information-based ways to make income are, man, it's going to be a scary world if you don't keep up.
It's funny, man, because like we're sitting here and I know I'm like, you know, my career has been based around information and knowledge and the transfer of that information and knowledge. So it's fascinating. Like, you know, I'm in that exact boat, you know, so it's, you've got to keep up, and you've got to, you know, I think you've got to keep adapting and being agile enough to figure out how you can keep adding value. And that's where my mindset is. So yeah.
Amen. Well, this has been awesome. I feel like I could do this. This is our longest episode by far, and I feel like I could keep doing this for 2 more hours. No, in a good way. I think this is awesome.
Cool. Awesome, man.
Well, I'm sure we'll rib each other on Sundays as the Vikings lose and the Packers win, and we'll have to do this again once you.
So you got McCarthy, don't you? So.
I hope he has a good showing. I'm not expecting too much, but I hope it's just not a big letdown.
Well, I mean, you guys were at the start of last season, like, you know, walking into the season pretty glum, and like, damn, it was a damn good season, right?
If I go back and look at some of the messages I'm sure I sent you last August, it probably would not be very good,
man.
But
whereas I'm feeling reasonably positive about the Packers this season. Like we've drafted,
I think you should,
receivers. You know, Matthew Golden, I think, is going to be. You know, I think he's got the talent to be a good rookie for us this season.
Keep Love healthy, and I think you're right. Unfortunately,
that's the hardest thing, though. It's easier said than done. You know, quarterbacks are pretty brittle these days. So, you know, like watching the quarterback and watching Burrow and all the like adversity he went through last season, man.
Yeah.
Like,
isn't it crazy how much you don't even really know what's going on, and then you watch that, and it's like you wonder how these guys even play.
You can't not watch that and be a fan of Burrow, though. You know, like this is the bit that I think I really like about what they're doing. I feel like it gives you that insight into like people, and you think like, Goff and Burrow and that, like, you know, it helped more people like them. If anything, probably I feel like the only one that it didn't do that for might have been Mahomes.
I kind of agree.
I feel like he might have been the only one that went the other way, but
I kind of agree. Yeah, it actually made me appreciate Kirk. You know, a lot more than I had, and
it's going to be. He's not a starting quarterback anyway this season, is he? So
he's still with the Falcons. Penix is going to start, but he doesn't want to be a backup. So I don't know. It's
going to be interesting.
Weird how that plays
out for him, eh?
Yeah.
You know, whether someone gets injured and he moves to another team or something, like something will happen. But I feel like he's not done, but we'll see.
Well, sounds good, man.
Appreciate your time.
Yeah, appreciate it, David. We'll talk soon, man.
All right, man. Have a good one. Cheers.
See ya.